technical issues, but we are back online, and I want to welcome you to the July 5th, Tuesday, July 5th Board of Supervisors meeting. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Christie.
Here.
Supervisor Grijalva.
Here.
Supervisor Hines.
Present.
Supervisor Scott.
Here.
Chair Bronson.
Here.
Let the record show Supervisors Christie and Hines are participating remotely. All other members are present.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance to be led today by Supervisor Grijalva.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yo le doy mi altar a la bandera de los Estados Unidos de América, a la república que representa una nación bajo Dios, invisible, con libertad y justicia para todos.
Thank you, Supervisor. Now we will have do the land acknowledgement statement, and Bob Tesso, Mayor of City of South Tucson, will provide that. Mayor, thank you for joining us today.
On behalf of Pima County residents, we honor the tribal nations who have served as caretakers of this land from time immemorial and respectfully acknowledge the ancestral homelands of the Tohono Nation and the multi-millennial presence of the Pasquayaqui tribe within Pima County. Consistent with Pima County's commitment to diversity and inclusion, we strive toward building equal partner relationships with Arizona's tribal nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And now we move on to pause for pause.
Hi everybody, my name's Monica Dangler. I'm the director here at Pima Animal Care Center. And today for Pause, I wanted to introduce you to my friend Sheba. Come here, Sheba. This is Sheba. She's been with us for, about 6 months. Her owners passed away. She had an injury that healed incorrectly, so she's got a little giddy up when she walks. But otherwise, as you can see, she's a very nice dog and likes treats a lot. She's about 6 years old, but she's just a cuddle bug. So if you're looking for a fun, nice, mature dog, I always say 3 to 6 years old is a perfect age to come adopt a dog because you know what you're getting. Come on down and meet Sheba. She's a real nice dog looking for a home. And just like the rest of the dogs in the shelter, we currently have a little over 500 dogs in the shelter looking for homes. All adoption fees are currently waived, other than the $20 licensing fee to license any dog over the age of 4 months. So we hope to see you guys down soon, and hope you had a great 4th of July. We are jam-packed with dogs, so come on down, and cats too. So come on down and adopt or foster. Bye, guys.
Thank you, Monica. Hope everybody's pets stayed safe last night. And now we're going to move on to, before we move on to Call to the Republic, I want to just, as a reminder, tell individuals who are wishing to participate telephonically, they must contact the clerk's office by the deadline date listed on the agenda. Each speaker will need to complete a speaker card who is present and will be limited to 3 minutes. Speakers must adhere to the rules of civility and refrain from impertinent or slanderous remarks. When you are called upon to speak, please step forward to the podium, state your name for the record, and direct comments to the board. Speakers who do not abide by these guidelines will have their comments interrupted. Thank you. We had one joining us remotely. Is Bill Beard? Has he joined us remotely, or do we know?
Madam Chair, Bill Beard is on the line.
Mr. Baird, you're first.
Thank you. I wanted to speak directly to the two mock elections that the election department conducted over the last couple of weeks. Citizens expect government to fail from time to time. However, when government fails in the conduct of elections, it can directly result in disenfranchising a voter. This board majority earlier this year decided to change the way voters in Pima County vote. You decided to change from in-person precinct voting to voters can go anywhere on election day and vote. While this works in theory, the two times your election department has conducted demonstrations, it would indicate they are not ready. The public should remember that one of the major selling factors for this new system is that it would essentially eliminate provisional ballots. These ballots have long delayed tabulation results, but in the case of the first demonstration on June 24th, almost 30% of the voters were directed to the special conditions table. As a result, those voters in a real-world experience would have to vote a provisional ballot. Should that same error rate, be it voter-caused or system-caused, the lines will be very long and result in some very frustrated voters and some very big headlines. During the second demonstration on July 1st, your new system couldn't even generate a replacement ballot identical to the first one. By her own admission, your new election director, Constance Hargrove, quote-unquote, hoped that the number 2 and number 3 position in the department would be filled by the end of this month. Most of the senior staff left the department at the beginning of the year. You have only one senior member in place for the August primary, and she is from another state. The learning curve will be steep, and you have stacked the deck to make practical learning about the capabilities of the existing staff nearly impossible should those new staffers even come online. During the two demonstrations, you had complete control over all the parameters and had unacceptable errors and would effectively disenfranchise voters. Pima County has over 620,000 registered voters. Even at 99% efficiency of your system, you will potentially disenfranchise thousands. I would add the department also failed the first logic and accuracy test they conducted last week. I question whether you have adequately prepared for this election cycle. As a former member of your Election Integrity Commission, I have seen what happens when the systems fail. By rushing this new system onto the voters of Pima County, you run the real risk that voters will be disenfranchised in the August primary and the general election in November, and be even more disheartened about the legitimacy of the process. I wonder how much equity will weigh with those voters. Remember, when a challenge to the results of any election occurs, it is your names as the Board of Supervisors that will be at the top of the lawsuit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beard. Our next speaker is Stephanie Kirk.
Hello, guys. I want to start off with thanking Rex Scott for speaking out on the fraudulent and unreliable PCR tests. Can you believe how much tax money and time has been wasted on these tests, Adelita?
Stephanie.
Oh, gosh.
No, Stephanie.
Why? You guys always interrupt me.
You need to get closer to the microphone.
I can, I'm short. Not to mention the waste that these tests, and please give me back my time.
Oh, I am.
Let's start it over. Let's start it over.
No, but
No, because the last time I touched it, I get in trouble. So, I mean, if it's not with her, it's here. So let's just start the time over and I'll start reading over. What are you gushing about? Keep your mouth to yourself. Thank you, Rex Scott. Sorry you were interrupted again. I seem to be one of the few that's interrupted quite often, Sharon. Thank you, Scott, for speaking out on the fraudulent and unreliable PCR tests. Can you believe how much tax money and time was wasted on these tests? Not to mention my time coming here. These tests and unnecessary injections added to our oceans during a time of which the elites yell global warming from their mansions overlooking a gorgeous bay of water. And to thank the FDA recalled the PCR test in which this pandemic was built for a disease with a 99.997 survival rate. I hope you now question why life-saving medications were banned while experimental injections were provided for free with my tax money. Matt Hines. Empower Diagnostic is recalling the Cove Clear COVID-19 rapid antigen test, an ImmunoPass COVID-19 neutralizing antibody rapid test due to the risk of false results from January 1st, 2021 through November 11th, 2021. The tests were dispersed with labeling indicating that they are authorized by the FDA, but neither test has been authorized, cleared, or approved for the use of the United States by the FDA. The FDA is concerned about the potential higher risk of false results when using unauthorized tests. The FDA has identified this as a Class 1 recall, the most serious type of recall on all codes. On December 2021, Empower Diagnostics sent customers a voluntary recall email to stop using all affected tests. That's all they got. That's it. Just an email. Antibody tests should not, the FDA said, be used to diagnose current infection. For a listing of the FDA-authorized COVID-19 diagnostic tests, go to the FDA page and look up recalls for the PCR test. Not to mention, PCR tests should not be used to diagnose or differentiate viruses. The inventor, Nobel Peace Prize chemist winner, Kary Mullis, stated that after his invention. There is an open letter from Pfizer's chairman, Albert Bourla. Has anybody read it? Stating the lack of science behind his own vaccine. What about Robert Malone, who invented the vaccine, stating that we should not be taking it? I want to know how much each one of you guys are getting paid. I mean, I know Adelita has a daddy on Congress. And what, you can't stand up for that? You shake your head, is that not right? Masks do not stop or prevent the transmission, neither do the vaccines. So who's lying here? The government? The vaccine companies? Who's lying? Congress? All I know is I don't care what any of you guys take, I don't want it. Stop pushing it on my schools. Rex Scott, do not push it in my schools. I am a teacher.
There is Anastasia.
I'm a little bit taller, sorry. I am coming today, dovetailing on what Bill Beard said earlier. I had a moment to really read a good dissertation from him last week in regards to the initial testing for the election machines that are going to be used in Pima County. I have a severe issue with the results of that, and I think every single board member, regardless of your thoughts about this being a well-meaning intention, is turning into a disaster, and it will turn into a disaster for this election cycle. We all know what happened in 2020, and we do not want to have a repeat of that, especially here in Pima County. I don't care what the other counties do, but this is going to create a massive, massive problem. It's going to be a visual problem. It's going to be a legal problem. And as Bill Beard mentioned to you here just a short while ago, it is going to be you guys at the top of the lawsuit because you here as the Pima County Board of Supervisors were the ones that voted this in. This is going to be a massive, massive problem for you. You are going to be disenfranchising. His number was 620,000 registered voters in Pima County, of which potentially 30% of those could be disenfranchised. This is not a racial issue. This is not a black issue. This is not a Hispanic issue. This is not a white issue. This is a legal registered voter issue. And I really wish people would get back to that. Legal registered voters should be allowed to vote. This has nothing to do with color. Color does not decide who a person wants to vote for, you guys. This is not right. And to actually have requirements for COVID vaccines for certain people when they're working at polls, I find that really disgusting and appalling, and I will tell you that is not right. You can't segment a certain population of people just because they want to vote just because they want to work at the polls. You cannot have a forced vaccination on them. It is illegal in the state of Arizona. Governor Ducey signed that into law last year. You cannot force someone in a federal facility to be vaccinated in order to do anything. That is not right. And I know, I read that law, and there is everything stemming down to this here Pima County, you cannot do that. And to disenfranchise voters, this sample test that went on, these 2 sample tests, was an epic failure. It was not glitches, it was not mistakes, it was not hiccups. It was an epic, epic failure. And I highly suggest that you all here really just take a moment to understand that if I go to the polls for my primaries or even the generals, if my vote was disenfranchised, we are all going to have problems, and the first people we're going to come to is the Pima County Board of Supervisors. Please reconsider these machines. Paper only, 1 day, 1 vote, no recounts, no length of time, 3 weeks later. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah Nugent.
Hello? Okay. Okay, I'm here today to...
We need you to announce your name.
Oh, my name is Deborah Nugent, and I'm here to plead with you to please stop all these so-called vaccine mandates. I'm especially concerned with vaccine mandates for all children. Now, before I go any further, I want to say that this so-called vaccine is not really a vaccine, because the former definition by the CDC's own definition, 1986, says that the former definition of vaccine must be protective from contacting the pathogen and stopping the transmission of it. This so-called vaccine does neither. Today, to cover their criminal actions, their definition is, quote, "The definition of vaccine now reads, a preparation is used to stimulate the body's immune response against diseases." Of course, this is a fraud in itself. An agency cannot just change the definition. Now, I got a lot of my information because I've been following a man by the name of Dr. David Martin. He happens to have a deep medical science degree, and he's into the investment and he comes from the University of Virginia. He happens to run a company called MCAM, and he's been keeping an eye on Fauci and the CDC forever, last 20 years. And so he's got all of it. In fact, he's got a lawsuit that is going to be coming tomorrow. Now, according to Dr. Martin, he calls these vaccines bioweapons. He's going to be seeking justice in lawsuits, suing medical companies and the federal government. Now, according to Dr. Martin, things are going to get worse. This is not a coronavirus vaccine. This is a spike protein instruction to make the body produce a toxin. This is an act of bioweapons and bioterrorism. This was premeditated by Big Pharma and the federal government. This was a campaign of domestic terror to get the public to accept the universal vaccine platform using a known biological weapon. This was Fauci's dream come true. These vaccines are depopulation tools. By their own estimate, they're looking for 700 million people globally to die, and that would put the U.S. population at about 75 million to 100 million people. He's on to say there are a lot of reasons why they hope it will happen, because by 2028, there's not going to be any money left in the Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So they wanted to get rid of them. The other problem that you need to concern yourself with are the doctors and nurses who have gotten this kill shot. What's going to happen when they die and there's not going to be anybody to take care of people? So I'm asking you to please, I have this paper here from him that I think you need to read about. And like I said, tomorrow will be their court case. The lawsuit is suing everybody from President Biden along with FDA, CDC, Pfizer, Moderna, and many others over the death and injuries from the CV-19 bioweapons. And he says this is far worse than the Nazis. Okay,
All
so
right,
I'm just
thank you.
pleading with you to please
Thank you.
stop the vaccines. Thank you.
Thank you. And then our next speaker is Anna, and I'm sorry, I cannot read your last name. Anna? Anna. What's your, yeah, and again, your name for the record.
Good morning. My name is Anna Greif. I'm the CEO at JobPath. Later this morning, you will be voting on amendments to both of our contracts for the 2022-23 fiscal year. And although we sent a comprehensive report a few weeks ago, I wanted to share our most recent numbers and just highlight a couple of things for you. First, I know you care deeply about the number of Pima County residents we help get into the workforce and out of poverty. And I'll share that although we're not quite done closing out our fiscal year, at last count, we had 610 participants fully enrolled and 120 in the onboarding process. We now have 2 full-time recruiters on staff that are working this year in our communities to make sure that people know what JobPath does, and our services can factor into their decision whether to go back to school to seek upskilling or reskilling. Second, we're working closely with Pima County employers to ensure we continue our alignment between the labor needs and the industry we focus on. We hired a workforce readiness manager and a workforce readiness coach who both are building those employer relationships and making sure that we're doing our part to ensure our participants have the non-technical skills on top of the technical skills they learn through our education partners to be successful on the job. Finally, I'd like to share that our plan for sustainability, we have a plan for sustainability for a now much larger budget. The ARPA funds we have received and hope to continue receiving through 2024 have been key seed funding for our expansion, allowing us to hire the staff needed and invest in the infrastructure that enables us to more than double the number of students we serve this year and continue growing to the target 1,000 students by 2024. However, we're already looking at what happens after ARPA, building relationships with our counterparts in other communities to strengthen our competitiveness in applying for federal funds, as well as expanding our service area into neighboring counties through state ARPA funds we received to increase our impact and make ourselves more attractive to private funders and large-scale national grants. I'm happy to report that we're already seeing benefits in Pima County to our regional expansion by increasing the capacity for healthcare students leveraging Cochise College's programs and support our manufacturing employers through the Advanced Technologies Network that now includes Pinal County and Central Arizona College, as well as Cochise. Employers have stepped up to invest in our local workforce with significant gifts to JobPaths. And although we're not waiting until ARPA funding expires to diversify our sources, I want to emphasize the importance of our close relationship with Pima County. The funding we receive from Pima County is destined to the exact needs of county residents and employers, which means we can focus 100% of our efforts in supporting this community. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our final speaker, Paul Parisi. Last but not least. Good to see you, Paul.
Thank you. Madam Chairman, members of the board, I'm really pleased to be here today, but I wish the subject was a little different. For Tucson is a Christian organization that finds biblical solutions to solve our community problems. Right now we're working in the Anfine neighborhood with task forces to reduce poverty, to have economic opportunity and development, and soon we'll have a housing task force. And I know my team is going to be working with a lot of your staff right now, so I just ask your favor on that. You know, I'm a first-generation American. Both my parents came here from Sicily, Italy, with my grandparents, and they came to work in the sweatshops in New York, jobs that at that time Americans didn't want to do. So I can really relate to the new immigrants that are coming here. And the main reason that my grandparents came here was so future generations could be born in the USA, and so appropriate the day after our Independence Day. I'd like to talk about Resolution 2022, declaring reproductive health care and legal abortion. I'm not going to get into an abortion debate with you, okay? But there's some things on your resolution that are wrong, and you should just pull it right now and look at it. Like on number 2, it says that abortion's been safe and legal for 39 years. It's actually in 30 states prior to Roe it was legal. I grew up in one of those states, and abortion was hardly ever, it was really liberal abortion, and it was hardly ever done. And of course, they promoted families back then with gun violence, and that was called the shotgun wedding, okay? Because people did the right things, okay? And I agree with preventing unintended pregnancies, but you should promote life, okay? And we should be looking at promoting live birth, on adoption, on helping women that are in crisis actually get help. And this ordinance doesn't do this. In fact, it's very insulting to the pro-life community, and we can find other ways to address this situation in a sensible way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parisi. All right, that concludes call to the public. We're now going to move on to our regular agenda. And as you know, at our last meeting, we continued the final budget adoption meeting. So we're now back to that. It's item 6, the hearing pursuant to ARS 42-17104 and Section 42-17107. We will now move to item 7, which is Flood Control District Board, and all of these items require a roll call vote. It is a hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us on this item at this time? If not, I move to close the public hearing and adopt the Regional Flood Control District budget of $18,475,401 for a property tax rate of .3235. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Roll call. If there's no discussion, roll call.
Supervisor Christie.
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva.
Yes.
Supervisor Hines.
Yes.
Supervisor Scott.
Yes.
Chair Bronson.
Yes. By your unanimous vote, the motion is adopted. We now move on to improvement district boards. The improvement district boards, there is, if you look at the agenda, there's Resolution 22 in the amount of $40,000 for Hayhook Ranch, Resolution number 26 in the amount of $25,803 for Martimore Addition, Resolution 29 for a number of districts as listed in the agenda. If there's no one in the audience that wishes to address us on this item, I move to close public hearing and approve the Improvement District Board budget for our next fiscal year.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Objections?
Roll call.
Roll call.
Supervisor Christie.
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva.
Yes.
Supervisor Hines.
Yes.
Supervisor Scott.
Yes.
Chair Bronson.
Yes. By your unanimous vote, motion carries. We now move on to items 9 and 10. This is a hearing pursuant again to Arizona Revised Statute, Section 48-254. Once again, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us on this item at this time? And again, this is the Library District Board. Hearing nobody, I move to close the public hearing and adopt Resolution 2022 LD1 for a amount for an expenditure of $46,600,637 and a tax rate of .5453. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor.
I think there's been some confusion in the community about what the board is doing with property taxes. I recognize that we have to put certain language in the agenda because of state truth in taxation statutes. But the board controls 4 property taxes. The primary property tax rate is staying the same as it was in this fiscal year. The library district secondary tax is going up 1 cent. The regional flood control district tax is going down 1 cent. And the secondary tax that funds our debt service is going down 13 cents. And so the overall tax rate that will be on your bills from Pima County is going down by 13 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. Nevertheless, the agenda, again, to be in conformance with state statute, speaks to the board's intent to raise taxes over last year's level. I'd like to ask Ms. Lesher or someone she may designate to speak to why that language is on the agenda, because it has certainly prompted to our office and perhaps to other supervisors' offices some concern that we are raising property taxes and we are not.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, while you are correct, there's a decrease of 13 cents in the assessed valuation. Because of the increase in the assessed valuation, there is an ultimate increase in taxes. And Ellen Moulton, our Finance Director, is here if we need to elaborate on that in any way.
Thank you, Ms. Lesher.
Could I ask a follow-up question, please? The truth in taxation statutes refer to the neutral tax levy, and that's my understanding for the use of this language on the agenda. Could you or Ms. Moulton address what the neutral tax levy is?
The Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, again, neutral is if we were not to increase in any way the amount that the average taxpayer would be seeing in their bill. The reality is, with the increased valuation that's gone up, we would have to have taken off an additional, I believe, 17 cents to maintain the net, the level required under the truth in taxation.
I appreciate it because, again, just based on the communications coming into our office, I think there's a misunderstanding in the public based on language that we have to put on the agenda to be in conformance with state statutes and what we are actually doing with the tax rates that we set. So I appreciate the clarification, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor. If there's no further discussion, roll call.
Supervisor Christie.
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva.
Yes.
Supervisor Hines.
Yes.
Supervisor Scott.
Yes.
Chair Bronson.
Yes. By your unanimous vote, motion carries. Moving on to item 11, Rocking K South Community Facilities District and Resolution Number 2022 RK1. This is a hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the board on this item at this time? Hearing none, I will move the item in Resolution 2022 RK1. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion? Roll call.
Supervisor Christie.
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva.
Yes.
Supervisor Hines.
Yes.
Supervisor Scott.
Yes.
Chair Bronson.
Yes, by your unanimous vote, motion carries. Moving on to item 12, Stadium District Board. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us on this item at this time? Hearing none, I'm going to move to adopt Resolution 2022 SD1, and that The stadium district amount, the budget expenditure will be $8,824,807. Any discussion? Roll call.
Chair Bronson, did I get a second?
Did I get a
I'll
second?
second.
Second, I'm sorry. Okay, we've got two, you pick your second, whether it's Supervisor Grijalva or Supervisor Scott.
Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes. By your vote of 4-1, motion carries. Now we're on to item 13, final budget adoption for fiscal year 2022-2023, and Resolution 2022-33. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us on this item at this time?
I do.
You have 3 minutes. State your name for the record.
My name is Stephanie Kirk. I was unclear until today that we were able to participate during the call to the public, other than the 3 minutes that were given. The total budget that you guys are looking at makes me disgusted. Up with the library on the LD1, I support libraries. However, I haven't even been able to use a library because I can't breathe in a mask, so I can't get in. So I'm against a lot of the taxes that you guys are, or a lot of the money that you're giving out. I feel like there should be more responses to our roads. I mean, our roads have giant potholes in it. They're being washed away by the wash. If we could get people to stop driving in them Sharon Bronson, then maybe we'd have more tax money to deal with homelessness. Was that shocking, Melissa? Because it happened. Whether she paid money or not. I am tired of the board spending money on worthless things. Homelessness is out of control. You can't even walk in here without tripping over people. But yet you guys are giving money to libraries that we can't even enter. I don't mind giving money to libraries, but I don't wear a mask when I participate in things that I put my tax money in if I don't wear a mask. I feel like you guys are acting like little Nazis up here. Smile, Sharon.
Thank you for those comments. Again, this is Resolution 2022-33. Is there anyone additionally in the audience that would like to address us on this item? If not, I move to close public hearing and adopt 2022-33 for a total county budget of $1,932,712.979 for a tax rate of 5.0652. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Roll call.
Supervisor Christie?
No.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes, by your vote of 4-1, motion carries. Moving on to our final hearing, and this is for debt service. Again, is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address us on this item at this time? If not, I move to close public hearing and adopt the debt service in the amount of $99,266,568 for a tax rate of 0.32. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion. Roll call.
Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes. By your vote of 4-1, motion carries.
Chair Bronson was 5-0.
Oh, No, I thought Supervisor Christie voted no.
He voted yes.
Oh, okay. By your unanimous vote, motion carries. All right, that concludes our budget hearings. We move on to the regular agenda. Item 15, we have one, well, actually, you have one executive session item on there, and then if you go to the addendum, we have 2 executive session items, number 1 and 2. I'd entertain a motion to move into exec.
So moved.
Motion and a second. If there are no objections, we will convene in exec and reconvene in regular session at the sound of the gavel. Good morning. We're back in regular session. I'm going to go back to our special final budget adoption meeting because I think we failed on item number 6 under unfinished business. The hearing pursuant to ARS 42-17-104 and Section 42-17107. I think we failed to close the public hearing on that. So I'm going to move to close the public hearing. There's a motion and a second. Are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Oh, I'm sorry, we have to do roll call on that. We do. I forgot, it's a budget thing.
Yes. Supervisor Christie? Supervisor Christie?
He's not on, he can't hear.
Welcome to WebEx. Press 1 to be connected to your meeting.
Supervisor Christie, can you get an audio check, please?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
Yes,
you.
cool.
We can hear you. In case you missed it, on item number 6 from the special final budget adoption meeting, we failed to close the hearing on that. That's just a performative issue. It doesn't require, we've done the budget adoption for the most part, but we failed to close that public hearing pursuant to Section ARS Section 42-17-104 and Section 42-17-107. So I made a motion to close that hearing. Again, it doesn't require any, there is no monetary consequence here. Supervisor Scott seconded that motion, and because this relates to the budget, we have to do a roll call vote. So that's what we're doing now.
Okay. Supervisor Christie?
Yes.
Supervisor Grijalva?
Yes.
Supervisor Hines?
Yes.
Supervisor Scott?
Yes.
Chair Bronson?
Yes. By your unanimous vote, motion carries. You've just come out of executive session. We're back on the regular agenda. We are moving to item 15, item 15, regarding the plaintiff's settlement offer in Marshall versus Pima County, Arizona Tax Court case number TX 2022-000024. I move to decline the settlement offer.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to Addendum 1, and that is executive session.
I'm sorry, Supervisor Christie's.
Supervisor Christie, can't hear you.
I object.
All right. By your motion of 4-1, motion carries. Moving on to the addendum, we are now item 1 pursuant to ARS Section 38431.03A3 and 4 for legal advice and direction regarding a conflict of interest waiver by Farhang Metcalf PLLC. I'll move to waive conflict and ask the county attorney's office to complete the necessary documents to achieve that. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 2, pursuant to ARS Section 38-431.03A3 and 4 for legal advice and direction regarding the request by the Pima County's outside counsel, Cardin Livesay Ltd., for consent to join representation in Cox Communication Arizona LLC versus Maricopa and Pima County in Arizona Tax Court, case number TX 2020-001152. What's the pleasure of the board?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor.
I will have to abstain on this vote. I got cut off during executive session when this was under discussion, so I did not hear the full explanation. So consequently, at this point, I need to abstain.
All right, Supervisor Christie will be abstaining. I'm going to ask our county attorney, this is for consent to joint representation. It's somewhat complicated, but if we move to consent to joint representation, any caveats?
Chair Bronson, members of the board, no. County
Mike's
Attorney's
not
Office
on.
is seeking consent to joint representation and direction from the to execute all necessary documents on behalf of the county.
I will move to consent to joint representation and ask the county attorney to execute the necessary documents in as we consent to the joint representation. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Again, Supervisor Christie, I think, is abstaining on this one. Is there any opposition?
Chair Bronson, I think Supervisor Hines had comments. I think he was Supervisor Hines, you had made some comments right after Supervisor Christie?
Oh, I simply agreed that we were both cut off and I should also abstain.
Okay, so there's 2 abstentions. Are there any further abstentions or objections? If not, motion carries 3-0 with 2 abstentions. All right. That concludes executive session. We are now back as the Board of Supervisors, sitting as other boards. Items under Flood Control District Board, items 16, 17, and 18. And under 17 is Resolution 2022-FC2. Do any board members wish to divide the question on this item?
Madam Chair,
Supervisor.
could we consider item 17 separately, please?
All right. I'm going to move, if there are no other, I move items 16 and 18.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion, objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 17 and Resolution 2022-FC2. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Scott.
Madam Chair, I was pleased to write a letter to Ms. Lesher at the request of the Regional Flood Control District on behalf of this project. Denny Dunn Park is currently irrigated, as are many both private and public properties in Pima County, with potable water. This project would allow for the potential of irrigation with storm water. But I had a couple of questions because there are also some habitat enhancements that are going to be part of this project if we are approved for the grant. And by the way, our match for the grant would be around $4 million. So I had a couple of questions about a little bit more detail about what the habitat enhancements would entail. Also wanted to know from Mr. DeBonis or anybody he may designate if there are any future projects of a similar nature being considered elsewhere in Pima County. And third question I had is, do we know of any similar projects being conducted or proposed by private sector water users?
Madam Chair, Supervisor Scott, as far as the restoration, the natural habitat area within the park, typically around the water courses, is where we will do those enhancements, looking to incorporate green stormwater and low-impact development techniques. So that concept will evolve as we move closer if we're selected with as a recipient of the grant, so we can update the board with more detailed information on the extent of that restoration, but looking to capitalize on already existing habitat along water courses. As far as the county looking for other opportunities, yes. So we're working closely with Grants Management and Innovation. Each of our departments in the public works areas have met with the Grants Management and Innovation Department, looking at the Infrastructure and Jobs Act for opportunities, as well as other grant proposal opportunities. So those things are being pursued as we're finding those offerings that are coming available. As far as private sector, I am not aware of any similar projects that are being pursued. That doesn't mean that they don't exist, just have not been made aware of them.
All right, thank you very much. And then could you comment a little bit more for public information on how this project is going to make use of what are known as dry wells to enhance recharge of the aquifer on this property?
Madam Chair and Supervisor Scott, so dry wells are techniques where you can capture stormwater, you can store it and then bring it back out and use it for irrigation purposes. So those are components of the project that'll be designed and utilized to not only store the stormwater, but then make it available for extraction and reuse at Denny Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. DeBonis. And I just want to compliment Ms. Shields and everybody on her staff with the Regional Flood Control District. Our district had a presentation from Mr. Sachs from that office on this project, and we were very impressed with the scope and the potential inherent in the project, and certainly would like to see future projects of such a nature be considered by Pima County. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Scott. Any other discussion? Motion and a second on the floor. Any objections? Hearing no objection, motion carries. We now go to the approval item 19, approval of the consent calendar. Do any supervisor wish to divide the question on the consent calendar?
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor.
I'd like to pull item 2 and 11.
2 and 11, all right.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair?
Wait,
Go ahead.
2 and 11. Supervisor Scott, then Supervisor Christie.
Items 10 and 13. And then I don't think I need to pull 19, 20, 21, and 22, but I have a question for that touches on all 4 of them, but I don't think I need to pull them to ask that question. If I can just ask that question when we move to adopt the entire agenda.
Supervisor Christie.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to pull consent items number 8, number 10, number 11, number 15, number 17, number 18, number 29, number 44, and number 45.
29 and 44 and 45.
29, 44, 45.
All right. We'll pull those items, and I'll move the remainder of consent. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Scott, you have some questions.
Thank you. Mr. DeBonis, with regard to items 19, 20, 21 and 22, they are contracting with various companies. The first one is for chiller maintenance, repair, and inspections. The second one is for emergency code equipment, parts, and services. Third one is for asphalt emulsions. The fourth one is for traffic signal equipment. Each one of those include 4 one-year renewal options. So I was hoping to get something in writing to the board. In general, what is the process for determining if a renewal is offered, and if there are different details for each contract, if that could be addressed, and who makes that initial determination of renewal, and who approves or cross-checks their decision. I just was intrigued about each one of these contracts having these 4 one-year renewal options, and wanted to know a little bit more about the process of how those renewals are granted. If that's something that we can provide in writing to the board, that would be very much appreciated.
Madam Chair and Supervisor Scott, we will work with the procurement department to put together a summary for the board.
Thank you. Just trying to learn a little bit more about the process for these items. Appreciate it.
Does that conclude your questions?
It does, yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve the remaining consent. Are there any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 2, under behavioral health, NAPCare Inc. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Grijalva.
Yes, thank you, Chair Bronson. So this is an item to amend health services contract with NAFCare to add an opioid treatment program for detainees in adult and juvenile detention facilities. It adds about $437,000 to pay for it. The company is providing health services for these detainees with a $17 million per year contract that will now exceed $18 million. It's a tightly worded contract with strict oversight, and I understand that we have not had any problems with NAFCare in the 18 months that we've had the contract, from my understanding. My issue is that we're contracting out critical health services when I'd like more information about how we could provide that in-house for less liability and maybe less money. NAFCare, like all other for-profit correctional health care companies, has had an unsavory record. NAFCare was accused in the Justice Department lawsuit of defrauding the Federal Bureau of Prisons by overcharging its services. They settled the case, but in general, I think the profit motive is a disincentive to the provision of prompt and costly health care that detainees and inmates often need. And I don't think we should settle for less bad when it comes to providing better health care for the same cost or less. So if I can get some information about how we could move to having these services in-house, that would be great. Thanks.
Actually, those are excellent points. So there's a motion on the floor to approve. Are there any objections?
I object.
One objection. Any further objections? Hearing none, motion carries 4-1. Moving on to, I think our next item is item 8. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pulling this item for the purposes of voting no.
All right. There's a motion on the floor and a second. Any other discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item...
I object.
One objection. I thought I mentioned it. If I didn't, my apologies. Moving on to item 10, Job Path. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Both Supervisors Scott and Christie asked that this item be pulled. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a little concerned in the background on this particular item. It states that the metrics goal has not been achieved yet, or it has not been determined, and that it was going to be in June, or last month, before the metrics goal was going to be revealed. So my question is, did we hit the metrics goal that was set forth in the last contract with Job Path, or did it reach it, or where are we?
Ms. Lesher?
Chair Bronson and Supervisor Christie, I believe either the Economic Development staff or Anna from Job Path can certainly answer that question.
Right now, we have, at our last count, and again, we are still closing off the fiscal year, we had 610 students enrolled and 120 that are being onboarded. So depending on how you count, we either far exceeded the goal or are just shy of it and are finishing up all of the meetings and documentation, everything for 120 students.
So tell me again, does that meet the metrics goal, or does it exceed it? I didn't quite hear.
It depends on how they're not quite finished with the year, but it appears that they have met the goal.
And we'll have confirmation of that to the board?
Yes. And
Thank you.
Okay.
My second question, this is extending the term, and the funds are coming from the American Rescue Plan Act, and the contract amount is $2 million. What happens when the ARPA money runs out?
So we are working right now on various different funding alternatives. We know that there's a cliff there, and we're working to get greater and greater private sector or private philanthropy grants. This year we received a grant from the ECMC Foundation for $400,000, and that, every time that you can demonstrate your ability to execute, that increases the amounts that you can go after. So we're using this as seed money and just increasing the amount of other sources of revenue that we're looking for.
So your plan is to find other sources of revenue in the private sector, particularly?
Yeah, we're trying to diversify.
No, yeah, it's not exactly private sector, but you're looking at a non-government organization.
Non-government, yes, and also employers, and we've started now a process by which employers can support the work that we do. So our strategy simply is diversifying our revenue sources.
And you feel that you'll be able to reach that $2 million sustainable mark that you're asking for these 2 years?
Yeah, so it works out to an extra $1 million a year, and we will. And of course, once we're fully operational and have done all of the things to support our increased operations, the amount of money that we'll need to sustain them will be a little bit lower, but we're confident that we'll be able to supplant that $1 million by 2024.
And do you anticipate the city of Tucson participating financially in any of this?
Yes, we're in constant conversations with them, trying to be creative and find ways for them to support us at greater amounts. Right now, we're still waiting to hear back on their most recent application round.
So at this particular point, we don't really know what or how much, or even if the city of Tucson will participate.
That is correct.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. And Supervisor Scott.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you. And I have a number of questions because I took a look at not only the memorandum that we got from Ms. Lesher, but we also got a copy of your strategic plan. And in the strategic plan, under current context, local economic development efforts, the first sentence of the second paragraph points out that Pima County and the city of Tucson provide nearly 80% of Job Path's budget. And in the memorandum that we got from Ms. Lesher, which also makes reference to the strategic plan, under your 7 goals, the first goal is increased impact, and the first strategy under increased impact is increasing and diversifying funding sources. Now, if we look at this fiscal year, and then moving forward the next 2.5 years, you not only are getting American Rescue Plan Act funding from the county, you're also getting it from the state. And the state ARPA funding is for $3 million over the course of 2.5 years. You got $750,000 in this fiscal year. But what I notice when I look at the pie charts attached to Ms. Lesher's memo is that grants and gifts are a smaller share of the pie than 2 fiscal years ago, as is the contribution from the city of Tucson. So what I'm curious about is, can the board get some more detail during the next 2 fiscal years? Because we are today looking at 2 fiscal years of ARPA funding. That's the $2 million. And then we're looking at this coming fiscal year for our regular contribution. But I think we're going to need to get some more updates during that 2-year period from you and from the Economic Development Office on exactly what is being done to as the strategy says, increase and diversify funding sources, because that cliff that you referred to is very steep. And the way this current fiscal year looks, the reliance on government funding, I'm not really sure of all the details of that strategy. It's not really fleshed out either in the memo or the strategic plan. I understand that may be a work in process, but I think the board is going to want to hear updates whenever you have them to share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to provide updates. What I can tell you right now, our revenue budget for next year is $3.9 million, and that is divided into, again, the state ARPA funds, which do not impact Pima County. Those funds have to be exclusively used in Pinal, Santa Cruz, and Cochise, and so we're working with those governments and those economic development organizations to figure out how we make that part of it sustainable. It benefits us here because we do leverage economies of scale. We're able to hire more people and do more professional work. But at the end of the day, it doesn't impact Pima County directly in any financial way. So if that money goes away, our operations here would be just slightly affected. We also received some federal funds, $500,000 from Congressman Grijalva, and we have, again, the ECMC Foundation funds, and we have a fundraising and grant goal of $300,000 for this upcoming fiscal year. So we've gone to 8 major sources of funding for this upcoming fiscal year, and we will continue to look for, and again, like I was mentioning before, we're trying to move away from the teeny tiny little $15,000 grants that are very cumbersome to operate, and really looking to get access to the bigger grants. But those organizations need to see that we have received large sums of money in the past and have been able to operationalize them effectively. And so that's what the ARPA funds is allowing us to do, is establish that track record and demonstrate that we have the infrastructure to operationalize large sums of money from other sources.
And certainly the success rate, the 95% retention rate, the success that your graduates have, the public assistance services that are not required because of the success your graduates have, certainly speak to how well the program has achieved since it began in 1998. But I'm just saying, as one supervisor, when our ARPA funds are gone, being able to commit to $1.7 million out of the general fund is strikingly unlikely. So
I would say seriously unlikely.
But anyway, just those updates as you're working on that strategy, if they can be sent to the board through the Economic Development Office, that's going to give us all a lot of peace of mind. Probably no one more than you, right?
We like to be held accountable. We want to make sure that we're meeting your expectations and we're being good stewards of these funds.
So I wanted to also ask if I could, and I'm going to quote from your gap analysis in the strategic plan. It says, the strategic planning exercise also uncovered a need for a more intentional focus on recruitment and outreach in order to reach the levels of growth stakeholders would like to see. And I go back to the memo from Ms. Lesher, which again incorporates the strategic plan and looking at strategies 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, partnering with education providers that align with JobPath's mission, improving branding, marketing, and outreach efforts, building strong community relationships for recruitment, cross-referrals, and network of support. I think it's great that you're working with organizations like Higher Ground. I have visited a Higher Ground facility at Doolin Middle School, and I'm really impressed with what that organization is doing. I think it's wonderful that you have a partnership with JTED. But what I am not seeing in either of these two documents, and what I'd love to hear more about, is what are you doing to strengthen your partnership with the K-12 districts and the public charters, K-12 counselors especially. Not all high schools have JTED counselors, not all high schools have career and college readiness coordinators, but K-12 counselors are working with their students on their 4-year plans from the beginning of their freshman year. And they're going to be tremendous resources in terms of identifying potential JobPath participants within the K-12 districts. So is there anything you can tell us today about partnerships with the K-12 districts? And I certainly want to encourage greater outreach to them, especially through their counselors.
Absolutely. We recognize that in working with adults that have been out of school for a number of years, in some cases decades, we're really trying to remedy a situation that came into play a long time before. So by addressing students that are just leaving high school and not letting them fall out of the system, we're addressing the problem at the source. So our outreach and recruitment manager is now working to develop those relationships with certain high schools, and we're trying to be strategic so that we can leverage our resources the most, right? It's really hard to go broad and thin. We're trying to go narrow and deep, so we're looking at certain school districts. I believe right now we're looking at Sunnyside to really start working with the high schools and have a presence at the high schools, and make sure that students, before we see a 3-month period, right, from May 20th to August 20th, that to us it seems like a blink of an eye, but to an 18-year-old that gets a job, and it's 3 months and stuff happens, and next thing you know they didn't show up for their first day of class at Pima. And so what can we do in that interim to make sure that those students, we can't really serve them until they're 18 and they're in a program of study, but we can sure partner with other organizations to make sure that they have the resources, the information, and the support that they need to not leave, to continue on. And because we know that there's students that have the intent of going back to school and continuing on at Pima or some other institution, and then they get a job and family and other activities come in the way. And so anyways, we're aware of the problem, and we're trying to develop those relationships and initiatives that will allow us to work more closely with the high schools.
So the main outreach right now is with regard to students who are not on track for graduation?
So no, our main support right now is just to adults. Our average age of service is in the mid-30s. So these adults have been out of school for at least 10 years, and they never continued their education, or whatever they got was inadequate. And so now they need to go back to school as adults when they have families and other barriers in their lives. So if we work with high school students as they're graduating and really make them aware that our resource exists, that might change the decisions that they make over the summer, right? That make their family feel better about that individual, instead of going to work full-time, actually continuing their education, knowing that at least that won't be a burden to the family. And in some cases, our services allow them to work and go to school at the same time.
And my thought in looking at both of these documents, and also considering the dialogue we've had with JobPath since taking office, is that perhaps an untapped source of potential are students who are on track to graduate from their high school, their counselor knows that they're very likely to be enrolling at Pima, and therefore they might be likely job path participants. As soon as they start up at Pima and are in that 18 to 19-year-old age group.
Yeah, and the other issue that we're seeing is that we're investing in our high school students through CTE programs, and they begin those programs, and then the number of students that actually continue on to Pima in that same career field is significantly smaller. So that means that investment was started, but it wasn't continued, but the money was lost, right? Because they didn't continue on in that field, and now they're working in something different. So what can we do to thread that or bridge that gap between high school welding and welding at Pima so they can actually get the certifications and go out into the workforce as professional welders?
And I think given the expansion of CTE and CTE JTED programs in all of our districts, I think you're going to find potential job path participants in all Pima County districts. I understand the need to be focusing your efforts, but I think there are students in districts that perhaps we haven't mentioned today who might be likely job path participants, and that's why I'm encouraging more dialogue, more outreach to K-12 counselors.
Absolutely. There's an incredible need for what we do right now, from every angle that you look at it. And going back to the funding question, we have to make sure that we've got the funding aligned so that we can support as many people as want to be our participants.
So I had just one other question that I wanted to ask about, and this is under Strategy 3.1, which isn't started yet. Advocate for the removal of workforce barriers by participating in community planning and strategy discussions to drive equity and justice. In the first paragraph, under that strategy, it says, moving forward, JobPath will collaborate with local economic development leaders to ensure projections are aligned with both educational institution capacity and local workforce demand. Consistent with my wish to hear more about how Strategy 1.1 is being rolled out, I'd love to get more details to the board, perhaps through economic development on Strategy 3.1.
Yeah, and just in short, we're having conversations, city, county economic development, chambers of commerce, multiple employers, while we're having conversations with the schools and the various organizations that we do outreach and recruitment with to help build that alignment. So when we have students that come to us that say, I want to go back to school, but I don't know what I want to do, then we can guide them to the careers that have the highest number of vacant positions.
And thank you very much. And Madam Chair, thank you to you and my colleagues for indulging all these questions. I'm a big supporter of JobPath and want to see it continue to thrive and grow. I appreciate its tremendous track record and the ambitious nature of this strategic plan, but again, expanding that funding base is just going to be so crucial.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Chair Bronson.
Supervisor.
Madam Chair.
Well, the Supervisor Grijalba, then Supervisor Christie.
So Tucson Unified has professional development days for all of their counselors, and high school counselors specifically have their own. So you may want to tap into, I know your resources are limited where you can't necessarily have staff at all of these schools, but maybe tapping into any kind of training that they already have, and then just let them know what resources you have available. And then your best advocates, I think, on any high school campus are going to be the counselors.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great idea. I'll look into that. Thank you.
All right, and I'll send you more information, too.
Thank you.
Thanks. And then I think Supervisor Christie.
Yep, Supervisor Christie. Oh, and Flowing Wells also. Flowing Wells has.
Yep.
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 Okay, Supervisor Christie.
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions got prompted through those previous questions. Do you have any idea what the percentage of unincorporated clients that you have in Pima County versus the city of Tucson?
I don't think I have that number off the top of my head specifically, but I would.
Is that available?
Yes, it is available. Do you have that, Christine?
And when, do you include onboarding students as graduates or in your metrics numbers?
So it depends on the on where in the process they are on the onboarding. Once we receive all of their documentations and they're deemed eligible, then we start the onboarding, and we do really count them because the attrition rate at that point, once they've gotten all of their documents in, is in like 3 or 4%. So we don't expect to lose any of those students. But some, we really have to help them gather their documentation because they just don't have it. So they get assigned to a coach early on. So yes, we do count them.
But, so technically, onboarding students are not graduates.
Oh, no, they're not graduates. No, those are the students at the front end. The graduates are, once they finish, they stay with us for 6 additional months or until they find employment, at which point they drop off. But the number, the 670 goal and the 700 and what is that up to? 730, I believe, is what it adds up to. Those students are the students that we served at some point. It does not reflect who the graduates are. We're still trying to track everyone down and get all of their information. We've already started our economic impact study for this year, so all of that will be available within the next month or so.
Yeah, and perhaps a breakdown of onboarding students and graduating students might clarify that question as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
I appreciated the comments that you and Supervisor Grijalva made about Tucson Unified and flowing wells and the counseling resources within those districts. I think all of our Pima County districts have people who are directors of guidance and counseling, and I would strongly encourage JobPath to be reaching out directly to those folks. And I think that Ms. Prather and JTED staff can also be terrific resources in terms of establishing more contacts within the K-12 districts, especially in the districts that don't have JTED counselors or career and college readiness counselors, which are the majority of them, unfortunately.
We will take any and all introductions and connections.
Thank you. There's motion on the floor to approve. Any further discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 11, Sun Corridor. Move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Grijalva and Supervisor Christie both pulled this item. Supervisor Grijalva.
Okay, thank you. So our office met with the CEO of Sun Corridor, Joe Snell, on April 28th. We agreed that we would like more communication between the Board of Supervisors and Sun Corridor, especially regarding what kinds of businesses we want to bring into Pima County. We have yet to see any increased transparency. Yes, on I think it was the 29th, the board received Sun Corridor's quarterly update, and then it was quickly, like, we got a little comment right after that saying that it was sent in error, and so to delete it. So I'm assuming one is coming, but what was attached didn't offer any more information than previous reports about what kinds of industries Sun Corridor is trying to attract and how many local jobs these ventures would create. We would be seeking businesses that promote the health and prosperity of our community. We do not want companies that pollute our environment for profits and will not be invested in Pima County. According to the Arizona Daily Star, Sun Corridor CEO Joe Snell said that members of the business-led economic development group were tenacious in landing the new BD facility. Becton Dickinson, BD, has more than 150 lawsuits against it because of facilities in Covington, Georgia, and had a massive leak of cancerous toxin, and there is a cancer cluster within a 5-mile radius of the plant. Sun Corridor is our partner. The considerable funding that we provide them should not be spent enticing businesses to our region that Pima County and the city of Tucson have to fight against because they do not represent our values. Consequently, we would like to see regular presentations from Sun Corridor to the Board of Supervisors about its initiatives to attract businesses, as well as more detail about the industries and corporations that they are pursuing.
Thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Christie.
I too share interest in the frequency of scheduled reporting by Sun Corridor as to their own internal metrics, and I don't think we see them in any kind of standardized form or on a regular basis. And I would like to urge Sun Corridor to be more communicative with the board, particularly when we're contributing $650,000 a year. I think it's incumbent upon Sun Corridor to be much more forthcoming in their reporting frequency, and I would please urge them to do so. I do have a question again regarding the contributions made to Sun Corridor. We, as it's obvious here on the item, contribute and have contributed $650,000 a year for some time now. How much does the city of Tucson contribute?
I think at this point, the paradigm for this, which was set, I want to say 10 years ago, but it could be a decade or so, we went to a regional model where Pima County provided the majority of the money. And then correct me, Ms. Lesher, if I'm wrong, and as to your point, which is legitimate in terms of getting the reporting, both Supervisor Grijalva and you, Supervisor Christie, I think they were reporting to us, but it was not coming to the board. But again, I defer to Ms. Lesher.
Chair Bronson, I believe that is accurate, that what we've seen is that we did have reports that were coming in historically that were not coming through to the board. What happened recently is that we sent a report at the end of the quarter and realized it was a previous quarter's report. So we have indicated in working with Sun Corridor that we needed to get much better in getting that information on a regular basis to the board, and we will make sure that that occurs.
All right, any other questions, Supervisor Christie?
Just a confirmation, somewhere in the whole setup of the contributions of the jurisdictions for Sun Corridor, is my understanding correct that with our $650,000 a year from Pima County, that the city of Tucson contributes $10,000?
I'm not sure of the exact amount, but that sounds about right.
Did we find that breakdown?
No.
Could that breakdown be provided?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, apologies. So it is, I don't believe it's $10,000, I believe it's $50,000 right now. However, I can double
Like 50 as opposed to 15. 50. 50,000, which I think Oro Valley is contributing some monies, and we're getting some monies from...
Yes, ma'am. We can get you a regional report effectively if that would be
great.
of interest to the board.
Okay, great. All right, and I think we're getting some from Pinal County as well, weren't we?
To my knowledge, no, but I can double check with their new economic development director.
At one point we were, I don't know if we still are. All right. Yep. Supervisor Christie, any other questions?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that this report would include all of the contributors in total, not only the jurisdictions but the private sectors as well, just to see where the balance of the monies are coming through.
That's easily accomplishable. Correct?
Chair Bronson, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, I'll call the question then. Any objections?
I object.
One objection. Hearing no further objections. I'm sorry.
Supervisor Hines. The Chair Bronson, if I could explain my vote, please.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what your vote was.
I'm going to vote yes, but I just wanted to explain my vote.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I actually voted no last time this came up. I've since then met with Joe Snell, the CEO at Sun Corridor, and I've also had multiple conversations with the Sun Corridor, the chair of the Sun Corridor board, and I will vote yes. But I would like to also echo the concerns expressed by my colleague, Supervisor Grijalva, and this will, if these issues aren't addressed moving forward, especially on transparency and communication, this will be the last time I vote yes.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you.
If there are no further comments, we have, I think, one no vote. Is that correct?
Correct.
So motion carries 4-1, with Supervisor Grijalva voting in opposition. Moving on to item 13, I'll move the item, job path.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Scott, did you have any further questions?
No, ma'am, thank you.
If there's no discussion, and there are no objections, then motion carries. Moving on to item 15, Catholic Community Services. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
I have a couple of quick questions here. It says in the item on the agenda that we are extending a contract with Catholic Community Services of Southern Arizona to provide a cooperative agreement for the provision of humanitarian services located at Casa Alitas, and to extend the contract term into July of 2023. And it says that there's no cost. I guess if I could have some kind of a explanation about how there could be an extended contract with no cost involved.
Ms. Lesher.
Chair Bronson, excuse me, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, there is no additional cost to any parts of the provision that have been paid heretofore. This is our agreement with Catholic Community Services to run the Casa Alitas Welcome Center at the what was previously the juvenile detention facility, and this is just a continuation of that agreement at no cost. There are no additional costs.
And what was the amount of the original agreement?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I don't have that number with me. I'm happy to get that back to you.
Okay, thank you. Another quick question, Madam Chair. Our county administrator in a Borders County meeting, mentioned that the model is changing from sheltering using motels and hotels to the, quote, big box, unquote, model for asylum seeker processing. In other words, we're going to be using a big box space as opposed to a hotel or motel. And if that is the case, what happens to Casa Alitas at that point?
Ms. Lesher.
Chair Bronson and Supervisor Christie, I think what we've indicated at the Border Counties Coalition is that we believe that all the federal funding models are looking to reimburse for the big box model. It is our hope that we find a facility in which we'll be able to provide those services in a big box model. We will at that time make a determination about whether it is more cost effective to provide administrative services and the welcoming service, those initial services in addition to any housing, either at that single facility or to continue such at the Casa Alitas facility. But we have not yet identified a big box center to which we could transition services.
Would we be buying, or would the big box property be bought or leased or rented, or how would that work?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, it is the intent to simply lease a facility. Again, the intent is also, and we have been successful to date, not spending any of the general fund dollars on the provision of this service, but all funds have been provided by the federal government through the FEMA dollars. The FEMA model is moving towards funding in the future the big box rather than the single facility or the non-congregate shelter that we've seen in the hotels in the last several months. And so as we transition to that, we would be looking to lease a facility using the funds provided by the federal government.
And what do you think would happen with the facility out by the airport?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I'm not sure about the facility out by the airport. What we have at this point in the Casa Alitas Welcome Center at the former, adjacent to the juvenile detention facility, we will determine whether or not it makes financial sense for that to continue to be a separate administrative location, or whether it will move to a big box. If you're thinking of the larger facilities,
I'm referring to the federal. federal facility out on Los Reales?
The federal facility is a separate facility run by divisions within the Department of Homeland Security.
I understand that, but is that the model that they're going to be moving towards, or?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, again, it is a very different function. What we're looking at is simply, I think, one of the needs that occurred as we began to find housing for individuals who are seeking asylum legally in the United States was the concerns that arose during COVID caused us to look at non-congregate shelterings, which is when we began to look at the dissemination from the initial welcoming center into the hotel model. We would be looking to decrease and to eliminate the motel model and move into the big box. I think that some of the model that has been developed by Homeland Security, it does include the big box that is used for CBP and ICE at the facilities that they maintain and continue to run. It's a similar model, but we would be doing it, I think, differently in terms of how we provide those services. One of the largest differences you see is whether the facilities out by the facility or out by the airport that are run by the Department of Homeland Security deal with those who are who are in the United States legally and seeking asylum, which would be the individuals for which we're providing services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Lesher.
All right, if there are no further questions, there's a motion on the floor to approve. Any objections?
I object, Madam Chair.
Supervisor Christie objecting. No further objections. Motion carries 4-1. Moving on to item 18. I'll move the item.
Second.
Sorry.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Madam Chair, I believe I did pull item 17. Yes.
I thought, didn't we just do that? No, we didn't. Okay, I'm sorry. I unfortunately struck it out. Okay, I'll move on to item 17 first then. I'll move the item.
Second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like just to point out again that this is to provide in the amount of $3.7 million shelter to families and individuals encountered by the Department of Homeland Security, and to amend contractual language with scope of services, which basically provides emergency food and shelter to families and individuals encountered by the Department of Homeland Security, and that it's going to be able to reimburse costs incurred by the city of Tucson, such as SunTran bus service from shelter areas to Tucson International Airport as needed, and as also as needed overflow hotel shelters, and as needed overflow shelter staff. And maybe Ms. Lesher can assist me in this, but with this today's request of grant of $3.7 million, we're up now through this whole process somewhere around the $6 million mark. Is that correct? Or am I close, Madam?
Ms. Lesher.
Again, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, that is the amount that we have been reimbursed by the federal government to pay for these services. This is a continuation of a subcontract with the city of Tucson, who provides some of the services that we provide in the provision of care to the legal asylum seekers.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, is there any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Any objections?
I object.
One objection, Supervisor Christie. If there are no further objections, motion will carry or carries 4-1. Moving to item 18, move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Lesher, maybe you would be the best to answer this. What and who is the Inn of Southern Arizona?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, the Inn of Southern Arizona, I was looking to confirm, that is part of the Methodist Church of Southern Arizona. The Methodist Church has long been a partner in the provision of services to legal asylum seekers, along with Catholic Community Services and the Methodist Church.
And whatever happened to Jot Properties?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, we continue the operations with the shelters that are in the hotels. We maintain contracts with motels to provide services for a subset of those individuals. If there's not housing available through either Catholic Community Services or the Inn, again provided by the Methodist Church.
Yeah, and is the Inn of Southern Arizona, is that located on premises of Jot Properties?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I'm sorry, Dr. Garcia has indicated that they are the ones, they are operating now the Comfort Suites facility.
And is that owned by Jot Properties?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I don't know. I'm happy to get you that answer.
Okay. And is Pima County paying both entities, Jot Properties and Inn of Southern Arizona?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, we have a contract with the individuals who own the facilities to make sure that we have rooms that are available and that we pay for the just to rent the rooms. There are additional services that are provided through the emergency food and shelter. Shelter is a piece of it, emergency services and food is another piece of that for which we're funded by the federal government, and it is that for which we contract with the Methodist Church through the Inn.
So this is the first time I've seen the Inn of Southern Arizona brought before this board. And my question is, how did this case come about? How did it come about that the Inn of Southern Arizona seems to have inserted itself in what was already an existent program? How did this come to be?
Chair Bronson and Supervisor Christie, I think Dr. Garcia may have a little additional granularity on this, but we have been, representatives of the Methodist Church have been at the table along with Catholic Community Services and others since April of 19 when we first began to work with the legal asylum seekers coming into the community and have provided services to this population and to those in Pima County for the last several years. But specifics about this contract, Dr. Garcia, you may have some additional information.
But before we get to that, which I'd like to hear, who provides the services at the Red Roof Inn?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, Catholic Community Services.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt Dr. Garcia. Did you have something?
Historically, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, since April of 2019, there have been a variety of social service agencies, most of them faith-based, which have provided services to legal asylum seekers who are moving through this community. One of those agencies was the Inn at the Inn of Southern Arizona, which is a charitable organization associated with Methodist faith. They have provided services both in their own space as well as in other areas. The contract that you have before you specifically memorializes the fact that they are providing wraparound services for those legal asylum seekers who are making their way through Pima County and who are housed over at the Comfort Suites Airport Hotel. The reason for that staffing is because Catholic Community Services does not have the sufficient staffing to be able to both do Red Roof as well as Casa Alitas as well as this third facility.
I see. I know it might be a lot of work, but maybe you would have that kind of information handy. It would be very helpful and interesting to me if we could see over the course of the last couple of years when the pandemic and ARPA money was being funneled through here, how much Catholic Community Services have been granted and have received, and how much the United Methodist Church has received. If that would be available, I'd be very much interested in getting that.
We will provide that, thank you.
All right,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
all right. I'll call a question then. Any objections?
I object.
One objection. Any further objections? Motion carries 4-1. Moving on, I think we're at item 29 now. 10X Software Solutions. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very quickly, what are election desk modules?
Ms. Lesher.
Yeah, Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I believe they're the e-poll books.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
And we are being asked to provide $625,000 additionally for election equipment, which now makes the total amount that was requested for election equipment 50% over budget. And the reason that they're asking for this money, and the reason it's 50% over budget, is that the original printers that were ordered are no longer available and are obsolete. My biggest concern is how could we order something that was not available or obsolete? And if that's the case, have we received these new printers?
And Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, if I may, they are not the e-poll books, obviously, they are the printers. And I can tell you that...
these are the printers?
They're the printers.
Yep.
They are the printers, I apologize. The printers that we were originally quoted were not available, and these are the new printers that we've come in. I'm looking at the ballot on demand printers. We had a total of 260. We have received and processed 211. The balance of these are due by Thursday or Friday of this week. So by the end of this week, we will have all the printers in.
So, well, it's very concerning that this amount of money was spent to order and to buy printers that turned out, upon ordering them, that they were no longer available and obsolete. But I think there'll be ample time to discuss this further in the agenda, Madam Chair. So I'm clarified on the fact that these election desk modules are in fact the printers, and that the original printers are no longer available and were obsolete, and we had to order new ones. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Any objections?
I object.
One objection from Supervisor Christie. If there are no further objections, motion carries 4-1. Moving on to item 44. We have Mr. Stratford available remotely if there are questions, but I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie, you pulled the item.
Yes, thank you. This particular property is in the city of Tucson, and we've discussed this before, and I still haven't really recalled a very substantive answer, but why is Pima County funding the renovation of this very historic property and not the city of Tucson doing it, or at least Rio Nuevo? How come Pima County is now going into city of Tucson properties, buying them and renovating them, or assisting in any kind of redevelopment of them when they're in the city?
Ms. Lesher?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, this is a continuation of agreement that was entered into with Stratford, with Herb Stratford and Stratford, the group, in order to, the decision was made by this board some time ago to enter into this agreement with this organization regarding Teatro Carmen, and we are moving forward with the agreement as instructed by the board. I think if Mr. Stratford is online and would like to provide any additional information.
I think Supervisor Christie's question is not so much about the art, but about why we're funding the project.
And
am I correct, Supervisor?
Yes, you are, Madam Chair. Thank you.
And again, Chair Bronson and Supervisor Christie, That's a decision, the board made the determination that this is a project in which we would enter into agreement, and we are moving forward with the conditions of those contracts as established by the board. So I think that a question about whether or not the board wanted us in this business is best answered by the board.
Thank you.
Okay, and do we know offhand if the city of Tucson is contributing to any of the renovation costs?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I don't believe so.
Okay. Well, if it's already been determined, which I believe it has by this board to do that, I guess that takes care of that. But this is the actual amount that we're contributing, $277,000.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, this is the part of the agreement with Stratford Artworks. Again, if Mr. Stratford is on, I think he can provide granularity.
But it's a sub-award of the original contract.
It's a continuation of the original contract.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, if there's no further questions.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Just to bring the public's attention to some more details about this item, says Stratford Artworks has received awards from several private foundations that it would like to formally sub-award to Pima County. The purpose of this is to accept those private foundations sub-awards.
Thank you for that clarification, Supervisor. There's no further discussion. Are there any objections?
I object.
One objection. No further objections. Motion carries 4-1. Moving on to item 45, I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie.
Yeah, I just would like, Madam Chair, some clarification. Perhaps Dr. Garcia can provide it. Are any of these funds going to birth control or taxpayer-paid abortion?
Dr. Garcia.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, there are no funds that are associated with, there are no federal funds associated with taxpayer abortion. That simply doesn't exist. Yes, these funds are being used to deliver contraceptive and family planning services, but we currently, under the federal regulation, cannot provide abortion services or contract for them under this program.
Thank you.
So to clarify, the contraceptive items are being paid for by the taxpayers.
The contraceptive items are being paid for both by U.S., yes, but they're being paid for with federal resources that are appropriated by Congress and therefore come from the taxpayer.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If there are no further questions, I'll call the question. Any objections?
I object.
One objection, no further objections. Motion carries 4-1. That brings us back to our regular agenda. Item 20, Juneteenth paid administrative leave day. Supervisor Grijalva.
Yes, thank you. I'll just go ahead and read a little bit of this. But essentially, it has a little info about Juneteenth. And on June 15th, 2020, the United States Senate voted unanimously to make Juneteenth an official federal holiday on June 19th of each year. The Friday before the day is Saturday, and the Monday after is the day is Sunday. On June 16th, 2021, the U.S. House of Representatives voted in favor, 415 to 14, to follow the Senate's lead. And then President Joe Biden signed the measure into law on June 19th, 2021. So this would ask administration to take the necessary steps to prepare for the Board of Supervisors' action on a resolution awarding county employees with a paid administrative leave day to celebrate Juneteenth on or around June 19th of each year in a manner similar to that of Cesar Chavez Day. In addition, we propose that Pima County contribute $10,000 to the local 2023 Juneteenth celebration.
Is that a motion?
Yes, I'll move that in the form of a motion.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Discussion?
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Christie.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I too would like to see the celebration of Juneteenth elaborated in Pima County and in our community. But before doing any kind of a paid holiday for workers, I would ask that this item be continued until we get a analysis of all of the paid holiday available dates that county workers can take advantage of, and what the effect of this particular one will have cost-wise on the already existent ones, and as well as a inventory of all of the available paid holiday dates. Secondly, I'd like to, in addition to having it continued for that reason, I'd like to have it continued to engage Visit Tucson and/or Tourism's and Attraction, who can collaborate on the Juneteenth events, making sure that the entire community is involved and that it gets its heightened awareness that it certainly should have. And also, it will give those two entities an idea of the appropriate funding that this resolution is asking for. They may come up with a larger number. I don't know. But I think that this celebration could be placed into those entities under their auspices, and knowing their past histories of their involvement in such things, I think they could do a real bang-up job on this as long as they're involved. And I would like to see them, those two entities, as well as the administration, give direction to those entities as to how this can be accomplished. But I don't want to vote on this, and I would like to see it continued until we do get that an accounting for all of the paid employee leaves. Thank you.
Is that in the form of a motion, Supervisor? Motion to continue. Was that in the form of a...
I would like to make a motion to continue.
Is there a second? Thank you, Supervisor. Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of a second. I will call the question, but one quick question for our county attorney's office. Given the legislature's recent action, and I think Governor Ducey signed it regarding Juneteenth, want to make sure we've got all our legal I's dotted and T's crossed, but I'm going to vote in favor of the motion. So we'll go back to the original motion. Any objections?
I object.
Supervisor Christie objects. Any further objections? Hearing none, motion carries 4-1. Moving on to county administrator update quickly.
Thank you. Very quickly, I just, a couple of thank yous. First about COVID and the health department. As you know, our COVID numbers are up, and I'm very grateful to the health department who's been working with Pima, a strong federal partner, and we've set up a COVID treatment facility out at the East Clinic. So for any of our folks out in the community who may have tested positive with a take-home test, can call the East Clinic and see if they're a candidate for the Test to Treat program that's been made available by FEMA. So you might not even need to come in. Medication can get made available. So we have the numbers up on the website. So please, for those who are looking for a treatment, there's a way to get it through the East Clinic. After today's meeting, Melissa and her staff of the clerks will begin the move out and over to the first floor of 33 No Stone, and makes them the last of the departments to leave this building.
Where are you going?
And so, as you know, all of the residents in this building have been moved out to other buildings in the downtown area so that we can continue with all of the asbestos remediation and different facilities improvements that needed to take place. So thanks to everybody for their patience as they've moved out, and thanks to facilities management, Lisa Josker and all of her staff for managing all of that move. And two very quick thank yous to departments for the cross-county collaboration, for which I'm always appreciative. The health department partnered with our libraries, and we're distributing gun locks to anyone who wanted one, and they're available for bins throughout the county and both through the libraries, working with the health department. And we've also been working with the health department and community workforce development, and along with several of our other departments, Keno Service Center, et cetera, as we look at getting relief for individuals who need to get out of the heat. So we've got bottled water, sunscreen, masks, and tests for anybody who wants them. We now have them at libraries, neighborhood centers, Keno Service Center out at Ajo. So thank you to everyone coming together to help people get relief from the heat. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Madam Chair, the clerk's office is moving to 33 North Stone, first floor.
All right. Okay, moving on then to item 22, Attractions and Tourism Outside Agency Funding for 2022-23. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 23, Outside Agency Advisory Committee Funding Recommendations for 2022-23. I'm going to move the item with one amendment, and that is due to some either miscommunication or incorrect information our office received from Workforce Development regarding the Friends of Robles Ranch funding. They need an additional $20,000, and I'm going to ask that the board allocate that amount from the General Contingency Fund to support their operation. They lost a lot of volunteers due to COVID. They're in the rural area. They are the only access to these types of services that that rural area has, unlike in urban Pima County, where there are other ways and other agencies that provide these sorts of services. So if my colleagues would bear with me, I move approval of the outside agency funding with the addition of $20,000 from the General Contingency Fund to support Friends of Robles Ranch.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
I had a question for Ms. Lesher or her designee. If you look under the general services category, there are two requests for the Metropolitan Education Commission, $70,000 for the Metropolitan Education Commission in and of itself, and $52,000 for the Regional College Access Center. I thought we had taken all Metropolitan Education Commission funding out of this competitive process, and that all of their base funding, the base funding for this city-county commission that's been in existence for 30 years, had been taken out of the outside agencies process. So I just wanted some clarification on where we were with this.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, let me confirm exactly where it is. The commitment had been, and what we have in the budget is that the Metropolitan Education Commission had been moved to base funding. If that is accurate, we may have just freed up a little more of general fund allocation, because obviously we would not be funding them twice. And what may have occurred is they began through the process for outside agencies, and while they were going through the process, we moved into the base budget. So let me clarify that such has occurred and that we can see where that money is.
Good
Thank
catch.
you.
Thank you.
So we want to approve it, and then we'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out later, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Any wait, Supervisor Hines.
Thank you. Just real quickly before we vote, I just wanted to call attention to the annual contribution that we make to PAG in support of its overall work program. And I've mentioned this before in previous meetings, but in this case, we see PAG as administering public dollars. And I don't believe that there's enough transparency or accountability there. So I'm just hopeful that on behalf of Pima County and for all jurisdictions, frankly, that PAG is representing, that we can do better, they can do better going forward with their accountability. So I'm hopeful that we can pull our annual dues in the future out of the outside agency advisory committee funding process and make it something we review with our own professional staff and the board as its own item going forward to make sure that they are complying with our wishes.
Thank you, Supervisor. Any further discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 24, develop final plat with assurances. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Supervisor Christie, was that? Oh, okay, there were
I'll
2
take
seconds. Okay. Okay, it got delayed a little bit, so we've got 2 seconds, and I'll let Melissa pick whichever second she prefers to be first. And with that, if there are no discussion, and if there are no objections, motion carries. Moving on to item 25 and Resolution 2022-38, move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, objections, hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 26, Resolution 2022-39, sale of real property. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, objections, hearing none, motion carries. Moving on to item 27, Road Pavement and Repair Preservation Program. I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion? Objections? Hearing none, motion carries. We're now on to hearings. Items 28 and 29. These are hearings regarding a liquor license and a permanent extension of premises patio permit. If there's no one in the audience that wishes to address us on these items at this time, move to close the public hearing and approve the items.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion, objections, hearing none, motion carries. We've been at this a while. We still have an addendum. Let's take about a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and finish up the addendum. And I'm going to put on first on the addendum, because these people have been sitting here way too long, item number 5, Valley Assistance Services presentation. And my apologies to you, but we're looking forward to your presentation, and we're going to take a brief recess and reconvene in about 10 minutes. All right. Nope. Says it's on, but I'm not hearing. Hello?
You're on.
That one's on. Hello? Okay, now we're on. All right. We're back in regular session after a brief recess. We're going to move to item 5, Valley Assistance Services presentation. Supervisor Christie, we've got your presenters here. Why don't we start the presentation? And why don't everybody introduce themselves? It's not on. Here comes assistance, we hope.
Thank you.
Okay, there we are.
Good morning, Chair Bronsons and Supervisors. My name is Chris Erickson. I'm an RN and Executive Director at Valley Assistance Services. And with me is our President of the Board, Mary Fisher. I drafted a folder for quick reference as I'm going to do some key points in our service area, which includes actually District 3, District 2, and District 4. So we have a large area that we cover. First of all, I want to talk a little bit about our agency because I don't think you're familiar maybe with us at all. So Valley Assistance Services was called Green Valley Assistance Services in the 60s. We were incorporated in 1981. We are, if you consider, a social service clearinghouse, so we do social services and community health, and we do a blend of those in all those districts. I'm going to cover a few programs first because we do about 10 programs, and then I'm going to finish with the last 2 programs that have been really increased in our area, not only since COVID, but actually they're increasing now more as the needs are growing in our specific areas. A few of the programs are with RN support, so we do RN advocacy. We do support after someone is discharged from a hospital. We do only one program that has a fee-for-service, and that is someone that might come home from a hospital or have extensive medications and need a lot of navigation in the healthcare system. We see that a lot in our area, specifically in Green Valley alone, where we have a lot of senior residents and senior population that have many chronic healthcare conditions and need that navigation present. We also do a dementia awareness program. It's called the Virtual Dementia Tour, and we are starting support groups and some health education to a lot of the caregivers, whether that be young or older population that are taking care of those with dementia in their family, and that is numerous in our area. If you have not known someone with that, you probably will. So that is really growing fast that we see in the rural area as well. And we do partner with the Green Valley Fire District as well. So we partner with the Green Valley Fire Corps, specifically for fall prevention and other wraparound services. The falls, just particularly in Green Valley alone, there's 130 per month that are recorded. That if you would times that by 4 or 5 that are unreported, that's kind of what's happening in our area. And that can be quite devastating to one individual and might cost quite severely as far as cost-wise for that individual as well. And we do wraparound services. So we do the RN advocacy, we do financial assistance, and we do socialization. So that leads me to a couple other programs with socialization. We have a lot of isolated seniors, a lot of isolated individuals. We bring those together in socialization groups. After COVID, we started calling them at home. So right now, we're doing a number of calls. We have a whole group of volunteers helping us out with those calls because it's 1,400 calls per month that we're making in our area alone to those individuals. And that's a friendly phone call to check on them, make sure they're doing okay. If there's a red flag or something that signals different than that, it goes to our RN advocacy programs, and then they will go out and do a home visit to make sure that things are doing okay and they're eating well and nutrition-wise, and their health and wellness is okay. So we do friendly visitors program. We've had that for quite some time, and that has been increased lately. Again, world has changed since COVID. We have seen that in our area, especially the rural area, where people don't want to come out, they don't want to get out, and they're kind of afraid of a situation. So we're doing friendly visitors. We have volunteers in all of our programs, and we equal about 170 volunteers right now. So 55 of those volunteers are drivers, which is one of the programs I'll talk about just in a little bit. That is the quite big needs down in our area. So I want to say that we serve about 2,700 square miles. That is Sarita, Green Valley, Amado, Tubac, Tumacacari, Carmen, Arivaca, and we're going into Rio Rico. Now we go all the way out to the edge as far as Sarita goes. So we are going out to Helmet Peak and McGee Ranch Road and those types of things, and almost all the way out to Coronado, Tucson as well. So we're covering quite a large distance and seeing quite severe cases going on with detrimental needs going on and urgent needs. So that brings me to my white sheets I have in your folder. And so I want to just let you know we do have a couple of satellite offices that the needs have surfaced in. One, we have a satellite office now in the Sarita Food Bank and Community Resource Center. So when I touch on our rental assistance and utility assistance, we're not only seeing those in our area, we're seeing those coming from Tucson. And we're helping those coming from Tucson. Northeast Tucson, Marana, they're coming down and we're helping them as well. And our second satellite office is in Tubac, and that is another great need. We have a lot of transportation needs down that way, and we're working greater with the SEGO organization down there, which is similar to Pima Council on Aging here in our area. Let me transfer down to now MAP. Our MAP, a plan, is Emergency Monetary Assistance Program. It has started over 30 years ago, so we have had a long distance running rental assistance, utility assistance program that has been refined quite a bit over the years, and it's unique and different from others because we provide 6 hours of financial education with that as well. So instead of paying someone's rent, we're making sure that they know how to budget, to save. We look at what their job availability is and what's going on there. So we do workforce training, and we do benefit advocacy. So we are statewide assisters of food stamps, or SNAP, as they call it now. So we are doing all that combined into one where someone comes in and that needs assistance. We also do LIHEAP. So we have started doing LIHEAP program for Pima County Community Action Agency, and we have just done that. We don't receive our own funding yet. We have just vetted out those in that program and have turned over the applications to them so that they can pay that. So hopefully in the future we can have our own funding stream for that, because we are seeing quite a few people in that one program alone. Right now, from the Pima County, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to get back to us, to get a reply back to those folks, to make sure that we can keep their lights on, keep their electricity bill, and all that stuff going. We also have worked with Community Investment Corporation. We are one of the 10 organizations that they have partnered with in the past. We worked with them until December 2021. And so we had a dedicated person that was working with them in our agency, about 12 cases per week. That load has not gone away. Even though we're not working with them anymore, that's how much we're seeing in our area. It's about 12 households per week that need assistance. We prevent eviction. I'm going to say that it is about 50% that come into our office with those eviction papers already. We are trying to prevent all that going on. We have been seeing 8 to 10 weekly as far as households, and within just the last few weeks, it has been 4 to 5 households per day. It has increased immensely. And it's probably due to our satellite office where we're seeing more and more people from Marana, Tucson, Northeast Tucson, and South Tucson. So we're helping those cases who are not getting assistance somewhere else. We have the ability and those programs in place to provide that help. Late fees are one thing that are not covered by a lot of grants, and those are adding up. First day is about $75 and $10 a day thereafter. So if somebody comes into us and we're 2 weeks late already with that, we're seeing $150 that they have to spend out of their own pocket just for those late fees. So trying to prevent that and getting in maybe just one day after would be our goal on that. Utility assistance is crucial. We have seen TEP and TRICO bills that could be $1,000, $1,400, and Southwest gas bill just came in the other day at $600. People are not able to even provide a portion of that down. And so what we do is we help them with that with all of our funding. And I know I'm going to get to that next because we do have limited funding. We write about 8 grants a month for funding on all of our programs. It's something that I don't see going backwards. It's just going to be needing much more going forward. The average to stabilize a family household right now in our area, in the rural area, is $4,000 to $6,000. Wow. It is about 2 to 3 months worth of that rent, and our average rent is much higher than Tucson. So that's what we're kind of seeing down there. I have listed our funding, what we get from funding. We do get the Community Development Block Grant, the ESG. We do get some money from Town of Sarita. We get the Community Service Block Grants, and we got 2 last time. We hope these carry over into the future, and we are always asking for more because we have, the needs have just grown immensely, and this program is about 1,000%. FEMA is about, you can see what FEMA is doing. It's delayed in funding, so we do use our own funding to cover those when it doesn't come in. So the total eviction prevention, rental, mortgage, and utility assistance funded is $3,337 and $500. And so that does not cover a lot of personnel. That's direct services to direct clients. It's about 10% or less that covers any personnel that we have. We have applied for outside agency funds since 2016. That was our last funding source. We have not received funding since 2016. We've applied 4 to 5 grants in OA per each cycle that they have. The MAP budget 2 years ago was about $150,000, which before COVID, yes, that's probably what it was. And now it's over doubled that, as you can see on your paper. One day, and I wrote this down because it was Friday when I signed the checks, 1 day of assistance for clients in our area in the rural Pima County, $13,230.30 is what I wrote on Friday, just to cover who we saw coming in. Now, the second thing is senior housing. And housing, we have cost soaring, availability very, very limited in our area. We have Coronado Apartments. I did these for examples just so you could know of kind of what's happening in our area. The Coronado Apartments for seniors have a 2-year waiting list right now. That is almost consistently a 1.5 to 2 years in waiting. The Sarita Mission Apartments have increased 300 per month. We have some villas that have been there since the 60s. They're small townhomes that have increased 400 per month. So we continue to apply for rental assistance and grants that help us with these because we're not only seeing families, large families we have been seeing lately, but seniors. And seniors that are so restricted on funds they can't pay rent and utilities. Now, the next one I want to get to on the sheet, and I have summarized this for you as well, is we have a volunteer transportation program. We've had that in our area since, again, the 80s, and that has grown by 300% since COVID has started, with about monthly increases of 15%. Last year, our volunteer drivers, which are about 55 volunteer drivers, have driven over 35,000 miles. We will be expanding this into Santa Cruz County and into Rio Rico with the help of SEGO and some funds, hopefully, from that.
So SEGO is giving you funds?
SEGO is giving us a starting fund, and then we will have to be writing federal grants from there on in, so, yeah. After-hours care is another huge need in our area, and it right now is it is seen by the sheriff auxiliary volunteers on the weekends. So the issues are still what we're seeing, but they're helping with out of their own pocket down in Green Valley. So we are partnering closely. We are part of the Green Valley Council and Health and Human Services Committee. And right now we're working closely with the SAV, which is Sheriff Auxiliary Volunteers, in giving them gift cards to help people on the weekends until we can get supported to run and function on the weekends. That is the huge need. Everything doesn't stop on the business hours. It continues well into the evening hours and definitely on the weekends in our rural areas. Proposal for that was submitted to the Office of Supervisor Christie. And the Green Valley Council, the Health and Human Services, did recognize this need. We've been working on it since about November of 2021. So I thank you for presenting. I did it kind of fast. I wanted to do bullet points. This is very exciting for our agency. Even though we've been in existence for so long, this is the first time we had a chance to present. I really thank you, and I welcome any comments or questions.
Well, I want to thank you, Chris and Mary, for everything you're doing. Amado likes you, Arivaca likes you, there's no question. So thank you, and I'm glad that you got to educate all of us up here, because it's very often the rural areas get neglected for the urban areas. So again, your volunteer work, the Sarita, the food bank, it's amazing what you all do. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the ladies? Supervisor Christie, I'm sure you do.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And Chris and Mary, thank you so much for being so patient and sitting through this rather strenuous ordeal, but you've done it marvelously and you did a great presentation. One thing that really struck me was the after-hours issue, in addition to all the other challenges that Valley Assistance Services has to deal with in the community there. But things always seem to go south or bad when it's after hours, after Friday after 5 o'clock all the way through Monday morning at 8 o'clock, and there's just no assistance, there's no ability to attend to those who at that particular time are really struggling and need it the most. And I've heard stories, and perhaps you can corroborate this, that sheriff's auxiliary volunteers and other members of the Green Valley Council who have been involved actually dig into their own pockets to provide some sort of sustenance, food, milk, or something to keep these folks fed, and to the point where these folks just have absolutely no money to deal with it. And this money is coming from the volunteers' own pockets. So this has been a pressing issue for some time. I think it's terrific that it's being brought before the Board of Supervisors. And Madam Chair, I echo your comments as well. And I would just hope that we could get Valley Assistance Services into the administration, the county administrator, to find a pathway and a funding source that this could be utilized to help sustain that community, which is suffering so greatly in the rural areas and needing the help when there is no help available. and hopefully we can find a way and a mechanism to support their services and to bring relief to those people who are suffering the most. So that would be my direction to the county administration, and I would certainly hope that the board would support that, and I know the chair does. Thank you both, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, and go ahead and contact County Administrator Lesher, but it looks like you've got the grant thing, kind of the grant writing thing down, so yeah, make sure, and Ms. Lesher will put you in contact with some of our staff who can provide you with information so you get on our to-do list to assist you in all the great things you do for your community.
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I thank you so much. Most of the grants are competitive, and you know most of them probably go to Tucson agencies. We are in that competitive process, and it sometimes takes a long time to get funding for those specific needs we see, but we are seeing quite a few. One thing I do want to mention, and I think it's really, really very important, we don't have a shelter. We do have one domestic violence shelter. We do not have a homelessness shelter. And so we do our best, because we are the agency to do that, we do our best to take care of those and make sure all of their needs are covered. We kind of do a holistic look at when someone is. And there are homeless down in our area. They happen to be in cars instead of sometimes washes, and they move their cars from parking lot to parking lot. So we do see that as well. There's huge needs.
And what I'm seeing in District 3 at this point, among those who have retired, is they're beginning to lose their homes, and especially if one of the spouse or if a spouse dies, and then the Social Security benefits decrease, and so you've got some issues that we need to pay attention to in terms of the aging population.
We had a great partner who helped develop some of our RN advocacy programs, Dr. Tom Purdon, who is a well-known doctor down in our area and also an educator at U of A. So he helped us along, very strong part until he moved out of the area. But, one medical bill on some of these fixed seniors' incomes, that's it.
Yep.
And it's very devastating when they come in.
Yep. Well, again, I thank you for your advocacy. Supervisor Christie.
Madam Chair, just one last statement. Chris and Mary, please continue to know that you can utilize and get assistance from our Green Valley office and our Green Valley representative, Tom Bresney there, who's always willing and
who sat patiently here for a while.
Always willing to give you the support that he can, and of course you have our office's full support as well.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Thank you. I was struck, Ms. Erickson, during your presentation by the fact that you have not been found to be eligible for outside agency support since 2016. I wonder if it's possible, Ms. Lesher, if staff from Community Workforce Development could follow up with Valley Assistance Services to help them perhaps to put together a proposal for outside agency support that might be more likely to pass muster. And I don't know if that was something you were already planning to discuss with Ms. Erickson and Ms. Fisher, but I think that was something that really stood out for me.
Chair Bronson and Supervisor Scott, I'm happy to meet with them and talk about all the different funding opportunities there are. They do receive 2 grants currently through the Emergency Solutions grants, totaling about $140,000. But we're happy to see what other grants.
The ESS grants.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go back to the regular agenda, or the addendum agenda. We'll go back to the regular order. We're on I think at this point, item 3, support for access to reproductive health care, resolution 2022-40. I put this item on the agenda, and I will move the resolution.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Discussion?
Chair Bronson?
Supervisor.
The Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade goes against the principles of democracy that are a core of our community. It denies civil rights to the people of the United States, as well as their constitutional guarantee of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Criminalizing abortion needlessly endangers the lives of women and menstruators. Make no mistake, denying someone the choice to safely terminate their pregnancy is not about saving a possible life. It is a form of oppression, forcing women and individuals who are pregnant to carry a child to term against their will, puts their health at risk, strips them of their bodily autonomy, and perpetuates the cycle of poverty. It's sad that we live in a country where my daughter has less rights and freedoms than both her mother and grandmother had. For these reasons, I stand in support of this resolution and what it stands for. And thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you.
Madam
Supervisor.
Thank you. I want to associate myself with all the language of the resolution and also the comments made by my colleague from District 5. And I also would very much be interested in getting frequent updates from the county administrator on the 3 areas of direction that this resolution provides. I would be very interested, especially in what we're doing to convene community clinical partners from across Pima County for the purpose of planning, coordination, and delivery of legal reproductive care, especially given the data that you cited about the importance of that reproductive care to women in our communities. So if we can get those updates as frequently as possible. And I thank the chair for putting this item on the agenda. I think local officials in the wake of the Dobbs decision are asking ourselves, what can we do? And I think you helped to answer that question, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, Chair Bronson,
Supervisor Hines.
Thank you. I echo everything that I've heard my colleagues say, both Supervisors Grijalva and Scott. And I believe that there is a constitutional protection that unfortunately was just thrown out by our Supreme Court. And I think that the basis really can be seen in multiple places in our Constitution. The First Amendment, freedom of religion, I think pretty clearly, we all know that says that there shall be no establishment of religion. So that's kind of an issue. The 13th Amendment, because forcing any individual to do something against their will could be interpreted as a form of indentured servitude or slavery. That would be a problem. And of course, the 14th Amendment as well, which says that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, and so on. So with regard to deprive any person of life, liberty, due process of law, etc. So I really strongly believe that this was a very wrong decision, and the court usually figures it out. Like we saw this with regard to some of the equality issues, gay marriage, Defense of Marriage Act, that it took it a few rulings, but it kind of finally figured out that things were, that society had moved, in this direction, and the court eventually followed. They've really like thrown things back. So I appreciate this resolution, and I absolutely support the fact, and I appreciate you bringing it forward. I would say, by way of direction to our staff, that we need to look at whatever we can do as a county through our health department and extend ourselves through telehealth and telemedicine resources into the library system to see what we can do in terms of counseling, contraception, with regard to contraception, and even provision of Plan B and other interventions if deemed appropriate by our staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. Any other discussion? I'll call the question. Any objections?
I object.
One objection from Supervisor Christie. If there are no further objection, motion carries 4-1. Moving on to item 4, removal of vaccination requirement for election aid. Supervisor Scott.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move this item, but I'd like to move it with an amendment based on a conversation I had last week with our county recorder. I would like to add, after where it says within the Elections Department, include the 3 words, and Recorder's Office. So I would move the item with that amendment.
I will second.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If all of the public will recall, the county requires COVID vaccinations for our current employees who are working exclusively or primarily with vulnerable populations, for anybody who is seeking a promotion, for anybody who is doing work outside the county, and beyond their duties as a county employee, they have other employment, and for new hires. This board took the action to remove that requirement for election day workers in a previous vote. But what I have heard from both the head of the Elections Division and, yes, also from the county recorder is that because of the prior experience and institutional knowledge of people that they would like to hire who may not be vaccinated, they would like that requirement to be removed. We are required to have equal numbers of members of both political parties for these election aid positions. And the emphasis on both prior experience and institutional knowledge were the main points of emphasis in my conversation with the recorder, who asked that her election aides also be included in this exemption if the board removes this requirement for the election aid position.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor.
Madam Chair?
Supervisor Christie.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. It's happened in prior meetings on this issue that we thought that it was going to be pretty much of an inclusive element of removal of vaccination requirements, but it appears from the last meeting that it didn't completely cover a number of very significant employees in both the recorder's office and in the elections department. And with Supervisor Scott's indulgence, I'd just like to state what I would look for as far as assurances before I could support his resolution. And I would ask also that if they don't include them, that they would be included, and it might be in the form of a substitute motion. But I need to know that this item must give assurances and guarantees that COVID-19 restrictions, requirements, and mandates will be removed and lifted off of all election hires and workers in both the Pima County Recorder's Office and the Pima County Department of Elections. It will further apply to all election hires and workers working in all capacities at all staffing levels, be they intermittent employees, new employees, permanent employees, temporary employees, part-time employees, seasoned employees, or any other category of employment at the Pima County Elections Department and the Pima County Recorder's Office. Additionally, this item will apply to all employees that I just stated who will be working in all and any elections, be they early voting, absentee voting, mail-in voting, actual day of election voting, and at all locations designated for the purposes of conducting elections and voting by the Pima County Department of Elections and by the Pima County Recorder's Office, and that this will apply to all election and voting activities throughout the 2022 Pima County election cycle timeframe. Is there anything wrong with the way I've presented what my concerns are on this?
Ms. Lesher?
Chair Bronson, what came to the last meeting and what's come today is simply a request, I believe, and what came from staff last time and now from Supervisor Scott, that the individuals who would be working for a limited period of time for the elections, that for those individuals, the vaccine mandate would be lifted. And as the way I understand Supervisor Christie's conversation, there are additional individuals who are being hired by the Elections Department. For example, we've just hired a deputy director and and an administrative support, an administrative manager, program manager. These are county employees who are part of the system every day, and we have not proposed at this point that those individuals that the mandate be lifted for those individuals as they are permanent county employees.
Madam Chair.
Supervisor.
Just to add on to Ms. Lesher's point and also to in some way respond to Supervisor Christie's concerns, just a reminder that the Arizona legislature passed and the governor signed a piece of legislation that will remove vaccine requirements imposed by all governments 90 days after the legislature adjourned. And so I believe that law will take effect sometime in September.
September 24th.
September 24th. You had the exact date. Thank you. And the request that we had was for these temporary workers, these election aides, in both the elections office and the recorder's office.
So I think Supervisor Christie, your concerns have already been addressed at the state level, and what we need to do now is act immediately on this so we have election workers for the primary.
That's correct. I actually was focusing on Pima County elections and the workers there. I don't want any squishy room in this that a certain employee who's temporarily hired does not have to have the vaccination, but somebody who's been hired before in a previous election cycle and still carries the same PIN number is going to be required to be vaccinated. I'm just very fearful and mistrustful that there's going to be some squishy room here that will not allow this lifting of the requirement to occur and will cause problems with the balance of, for instance, poll observers and poll workers. And that's my concern. I'm trying to make this as broad and as inclusive as possible. Now, if there are areas like the county administrator pointed out that you have leadership and management in one of those departments, then certainly we can make agreements for that and accommodations for that. But I'm talking about the run-of-the-mill volunteers or temporary employees or a whole assortment of employee categories that this should apply to, and that's my concern.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Madam Chair, Ms. Lesher, when you and I were communicating, you mentioned 3 specific roles that election aides play within the elections office. And if you could speak to those. And then just before you do, Supervisor Christie, just wanted to point out that when I spoke with the recorder last week, her human resources director was the one who prevailed upon her to have the recorder's office added to this item because there were specific prior employees that they had hired through the election aides position that their prior experience and institutional knowledge was desired. So I don't think there's going to be any squishiness, to use your term, based on what I heard from the recorder. But Ms. Lesher, if you could speak to those 3 roles that election aides play, and again reiterating that we need an equal number of members of both parties in those roles.
Chair Bronson and Supervisor Scott, and let me again reiterate, our intent by supporting this resolution that's coming today is not to be squishy, but to make sure that we have included all of the individuals who would be providing the work of the elections in the recorder's office leading up to Election Day. The only line that we would draw is for those employees who are permanent employees and working 7 days a week or 5 days a week, and are permanent employees not related to simply this election, those individuals would still fall under the vaccine mandate until the 24th of September. Only those individuals who are working on the election day activities, making sure that we're looking at, preparing, training, going through the different cycles now. And forgive me, Supervisor Scott, if I'd said there were 3 it sounds like I provided greater clarity when we spoke than I'm able to provide today.
Well, it was, I can bring up the sent items on my email. You did it in an email, and there were 3 specific roles for election aides dealing with early ballots and spoiled ballots. And I don't remember all the details. I'd have to go back and look at the email.
And Chair Bronson, Supervisor Scott, how about I'm happy to provide that email and that information. But again, all we were trying to do in the conversation with Supervisor Scott was to provide the clarity about why we perhaps needed an expanded number of individuals who would be working elections in order to ensure that we had experience and that we had those individuals required under both the Republican and the Democrat and the partisan numbers that are needed, but did not impact those individuals who are part of the permanent employee base of the county. So with that, we're happy to provide that clarity, but by adding this language to this resolution today, it is simply to expand the role and to make sure that we have both election day aides and workers clarified, but they are temporary employees and are intermittent employees of the county related to the election activity.
And Madam Chair, just to I called up the item that Ms. Lesher sent me on June 28th. The Elections Department needs to hire election aides to work on the election boards. The election boards are early board, individual opening and processing early ballots, duplication board, individuals marking new ballots based on voter intent, and night board, individuals receiving ballots from vote centers. We need to recruit at least 20 election workers to fill the slots. We currently have 51 election board workers, and for all 3 of those positions, you indicated that we need an equal number of Democrats and Republicans.
All right. Is there any further?
Madam Chair?
Supervisor.
Yeah, Madam Chair, a quick clarification of all of the categories. Would this cover, or how would this impact new hires versus returning workers?
My understanding, Supervisor Christie, is that if these are, they're being hired into the election aide position, which is a temporary worker position, but if they've done the job before, they're not going to be subject to the vaccine requirement. Correct. In fact, again, those are the people that the recorder especially mentioned wanting to bring back in because of, again, that prior experience and institutional knowledge.
Could possibly a resolution be amended to read new and former employees?
It's already there. That's who are coming here as temporary workers.
And Chair Bronson, I think for clarity, it is when we are hiring or rehiring intermittent workers for the purpose of this election.
But it's intermittent workers. It's
Correct.
not full-time employees.
Correct. Again, the hiring or rehiring.
Well, I think a lot of what is being stated here by both the county administrator and my colleague Supervisor Scott is on the record, and I think we're all trying, hopefully, to read from the same page here, is that we don't want to have any instances where it comes up and we hear from our constituents that they tried to work this election cycle and were denied working because they did not have the vaccination, and they chose not to have the vaccination. So if I have those assurances, that I seem to be getting them, that we understand the inclusivity and the all-encompassing of this, then I could support this.
Thank you, Supervisor. I'd be as frustrated as you if we were getting those reports, especially since we were prevailed upon by both the Elections Division and the Recorder's Office to take this step.
All right, if there's no further discussion, I'm going to call the question. Any objections?
I object.
One objection from Supervisor Grijalva. If there are no further objections, motion carries 4-1. Moving on, I'm going to quickly, if nobody wants to divide the question, go to items 8, 9, 10, and 11. 8 is an IGA with SHPO, and 9 is construction manager at risk services for Canoa Ranch Sewer Extension. 10 and 11 are appointments to the Election Integrity Commission and the Air Quality Hearing Board. If nobody wants to divide the questions, I'm going to move items 8, 9, 10, and 11.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any objections? Hearing none, motion carries. Moving on, I'm going to combine items 6 and 7, election preparation update and mock elections. Apparently now the elections director, is Constance connected? Yes? Okay. All right. Quickly, election preparation update. Anything you want to say before we move to mock elections that Supervisor Christie put on the...
No, Chair Bronson, I have nothing to add at this point.
Okay. So let's move to item 6. Supervisor Christie, mock elections.
Thank you. We are combining 6 and 7, so that'll make the flow a little quicker and easier. Just an observation. This mock election, I think, was a misnomer. There was no election that took place. There was no tabulation of votes that took place. It should have probably been entitled, a new product demo, or a vote center demo, or even a preliminary check-in, or what I like to call a test drive, basically of a check-in. And I don't think it differed greatly from what we observed and participated in the Board of Supervisors meeting. And Ms. Lesher, is that a correct a characterization on my part?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, yes.
Okay. And again, due to the fact that the original printers that were first ordered by elections are no longer available, and that the purchase that we just approved on consent item 29 is now putting the budget 50% over, and we have to buy completely new printers. I think, Madam Chair, Ms. Lesher said that we have a certain amount of the new printers. Could she repeat those numbers and the due dates for the balance?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, we have received 211 of the purchased 260 printers, and we will be receiving the additional printers so that the entire balance of the 260 printers will be received by the end of this week.
By the end of this week, okay? And there is a concern that has been voiced to me that over the responsibility between the Recorder's Office and the Elections Department over the configuration of the e-poll books. Are we certain, and can we be given assurances that the Recorder's Office is not loading voter registration data on e-poll books, and that the Recorder's Office is merely giving the data to elections?
Chair Bronson, Supervisor Christie, I would prefer to add, our elections director, Constance Hargrove, is on the line and can answer those questions, I think, with greater accuracy. Thank you.
Ms. Hargrove, did you hear the question?
I did. So, Supervisor Christie, as far as the voter list, that actually is the sole responsibility of the recorder. So what the process is that they will upload that information to what's called Precinct Central, and then my staff, the election staff, will then take that information and download it to the individual iPads or poll books. So it's the same information, but they will not actually be downloading it to the poll books.
So there's a distinct firewall between the two entities and the procedures.
So the firewall is between the actual live voter registration list that the recorder maintains and the list that we will be using on Election Day.
And that list on Election Day that you will be using is going to be downloaded by your office?
Yes. Correct.
Okay. at the June 17th meeting, the Elections Integrity Commission voted unanimously that the Board of Supervisors follow Election Statute and Regulation 16-590, which calls for balanced election observers in the 15 voting centers. Do we have guarantees of that compliance?
Supervisor Christie, I believe those are early voting locations.
Correct.
I cannot answer for the recorder.
Chair Bronson.
Okay.
Supervisor Christie, those 15 sites are under the direction of the county recorder.
Recorder, yeah.
Okay. She's not here, and that is one of the questions I would have asked her had she been here. Which leads to the next question. Why is the recorder's office administering early voting centers? Shouldn't this be the responsibility of the Department of Elections?
Well, Supervisor Christie, actually it's by statute, so it is the responsibility of the recorder's office.
By statute?
Yes, sir.
And according to the Elections Department that posted the calendar of events, there's been several that have been conducted to date. I think you just took part in one this morning. The first event that took place, according to the calendar, was from June 13th through 17th, and it was entitled County In-House Touchscreen and Central Count Login and Assure Accuracy Test. How did that go, and what were the results?
So the logic and accuracy testing that was conducted, which was the 13th, last week, was, of course, my staff did logic and accuracy testing to make sure that everything was working properly. And then we invited each political party to come in and mark ballots. And so they marked their own ballots, and they came back on Friday to actually run those through the scanner to make sure that the equipment was working properly and that they got the results that they expected from the marking of the ballots. The logic and accuracy testing that took place today was conducted by the Secretary of State, and we passed. So we are now certified to be able to run the election on August the 2nd.
And the three events prior to this one this morning, they all went well, and what was their culmination?
Well, I wasn't actually in the testing, but yes, sir, they all went well. The participants were here this morning, except for the Libertarian Party, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. They were both here this morning, and their tests went well.
Okay. So we understand that there will be two types of ballots printed and produced. Ballot on demand, or ballots on demand, and pre-printed ballots. How do we know both ballot types will work and worked?
The test that the Secretary of State conducts requires that we print ballots from our ballot on demand printers, and they use those in their testing as well as ballots printed from the vendor.
So
and the accessible equipment. They also produce ballots from our accessible ballot marking devices, and they ran those through the scanner as well.
And the results were positive?
Yes, the results were correct.
Okay. We had a memorandum from the county administrator of June 29th, of which you provided a number of questions you received and your responses to them. One, I was hoping maybe I could get some more clarity on. The question was, will the system track the number of ballots and ballot requests sent to the printer by date and vote center? And your response then was, I need to verify this information. Have you had a chance to verify that?
Supervisor Christie, I sent that information to the vendor, and I have not gotten a response from him yet, but we do have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow where we will be discussing security items, and I'm hoping that the answer will be provided tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
Yes, sir.
Okay. One other question, just to reiterate some earlier discussion, maybe you could give some additional clarity to it. Has all 10X equipment required for the early and primary election arrived and completed satisfactory testing. And you responded by saying the recorder's office does not use 10X equipment during early voting. We will receive the final shipment of vote center equipment on June 30th. Final testing of equipment begins on July 7th. Are you, when you say we received the final shipment of vote center equipment, are those the new printers?
Yes, sir, I was referring to the new printers.
Okay, and there are, as the county administrator said, they're all on track to arrive here at the end of the week.
That is correct.
Then I received a note from someone who observes the voting process very diligently, and this individual is stating that, and this is why I'm asking for your response and your comments, that 10X is still, quote, tweaking the iPad interface. And as they find issues in the training, 10X makes changes and uploads a new configuration periodically. And that 10X basically has a master template that they customize for each application. There's no problem with that if it's done far enough in advance to lock down and validate the final configuration, which is often referred to as the gold version. But that is a process that is done months in advance, not days. Can you respond to that?
I am not aware of that conversation, but I can respond as far as configuration. So what the individual may be referring to is the workflow that the recorder's office and the elections department, we're still working on that workflow. I think you may recall from the Elections Integrity Commission meeting that there was a question about early ballots and being able to issue a regular ballot or a provisional ballot. That is considered a workflow. And when the programming initially happened, it was programmed to issue a regular ballot. And then there has been discussion since then that I am now on the side of that it should be a provisional ballot. So it's a workflow. So whenever we make a change like that, they have to change it for us. Yeah, it is getting a little close to the time where we need to lock things down. We're not there yet. So as long as we can get everything working properly in our workflow, then that's when we say lock down the system, we won't make any more changes. As far as what they do on their end with the developers, yes, there is a period of lockdown, so they will not make any developmental changes now. That period has passed. So development stops, but workflow processes that we need to lock down and correct still happen.
Well, you do seem familiar with the issues that are being raised by this individual.
Yeah, I am familiar with programming electronic poll books. I understand what the question is and what he's saying, yes.
Okay. And again, in addition to the printers, has all the other necessary equipment for the voting, elections, and the processing and all that, has all the other necessary equipment arrived yet?
Yes, sir, we have everything, and I think you remember I said we were going to have those little receipt printers for this election, but everything else has arrived. Everything else has been tested. We will begin the unboxing testing, putting the groupings together with the printers, the iPads, the Cradle Points, beginning on the 7th. So that is scheduled for this week. I wanted to wait until after the security meeting with 10X before we actually started our final processing and testing of this equipment to make sure we had all of that locked down so that we're not backtracking trying to fix things after the fact. So that's why we're waiting until the 7th to begin with the printers and the putting together the groups for each vote center.
Okay, and can you comment on what the current staffing conditions in both elections and the recorder's office are currently?
I can comment on elections. I cannot comment on the recorder's office, unfortunately. But for elections, we did go through a series of interviews for our administrative manager position and the deputy elections director. I have made my final decisions for those individuals, still waiting on, of course, the HR process to make sure getting references and things like that. But I know for the administrative manager, she will not be here until right before the election, but that's okay. She's got some election experience, and then the deputy elections director is in another state as well.
So there are still some significant hurdles to overcome in the next few days and weeks.
I would say so, yes. There's a lot of work that we need to do. There's a lot of overtime. We're moving into our mandatory overtime period, so we're going to be working late weekends to make sure we get everything locked down, all the equipment tested, and all of our training completed before the election.
And my final question is one I've always asked before, is what keeps you up awake now?
What's keeping me up at night now? Actually,
up and awake.
Fireworks.
Sleeping pretty good, Supervisor Christie. I just want to get through, well, the LNA testing, logic and accuracy testing was keeping me up this weekend, but I just want to get through this primary, make sure that we have everything locked down, everything is correct, and that we are doing everything according to law, and that's where I am right now.
Well, I appreciate you making time to attend today's meeting. I know you had a commitment this morning, and it's much appreciated that you are here today. And I think, speaking for everybody, all we want to do is to make sure that we have a fair and accurate and safe election all the way around. And I think these interchanges and exchanges that we're conducting at this level, and you are throughout the community, can only be determined to be helpful and transparent, and I do thank you for that. And please keep us posted as things progress. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Ms. Hargrove, for joining us. And if there are no further questions and there are no objections, this meeting stands adjourned. We will see you August 2nd, which is primary day.